right, look at that. Welcome. Looks like we have the show starting with Monty trying to find out where to be. So, working with a filmmaker, you were saying.
Yes, working with a filmmaker. Yes, it's after, I guess now since 2012, 2013, working with Ben Getbo. He's quite a guy. He is such a filmmaker and storyteller.
He did the Thunderbolts of the Gods video, guys, by the way, if you just need to know who that is.
Yeah, I guess he's got over 2 million views now on this.
Crazy.
So he is used to working with us and with scientists, and he helps us with our language and the way that we communicate, and that we need to be effective in the way that we communicate these complex and sophisticated technologies and the science that we do. And it's not easy. I can't start talking about electron transport feed characteristics and the free mean path between the anode and cathode. He says you can't say things like that to the public because their eyes are going to start rolling around and you've just lost them. So it's quite the discipline. It's good for us, though. It's very good for us.
What you do, I sort of approach it from the dumb guy in a show that always uses pop culture references.
Okay.
There's that type on a television show, like Stargate. He just asks a question and then suddenly he starts rambling about, and then starts like doing pop culture references, like one of the characters there. But anyway, the whole point is that type of thing is very identifiable to people, and that's something we do here a lot in the show. It's a little bit geeky,
Right.
but not that I'm trying to pimp it. I understand what you're trying to say is what I mean.
Well, I think it's like this. I would say that we're not anybody here familiar with Pink Floyd's The Wall.
There you go.
The Safire team are not the bricks on the wall. Like, we're not just another brick on the wall or another hamburger that's the same. We get out of the box and we try to ask sometimes dangerous questions that the scientific community has been locked into their paradigms, which I would consider to be more of a brick on the wall. You say they've been processed by the system.
Actually, that's materialism when you think about it. The brick in the wall, the thing, everything's made of a piece. Everything's a part of something. We're looking for a Higgs boson. We're looking for this type of particle that does this. We're looking for that type of particle that does that. Like, perhaps maybe there's something more cohesive and you're just missing the overall picture. And that might be a better, and I see that all the time. It seems that you're missing what you can do with what you have. You're not even, we basically develop devices with electricity, diodes and transformers and so on, and we put those together like giant jigsaw puzzles and build power grids and everything else. But just recently you can make triodes, like within the last 30 years probably. I'm not even sure how long, but the point is that, but we still don't need to use them yet because we don't really, it's not part of what we're using. We're basically just using a ladder logic system for everything. And we're still running off that idea where what you're doing is basically, or Parad even, or other people like that, you're doing something at a different level. You're ending up seeing, oh no, if we can use these capacitive shells in a certain way and control their height and so forth, we should be able to do this and that and this and so forth. And they don't think that way. Therefore, why would they ever come to that conclusion? Why would it dawn on them to do that?
Yeah, exactly. We do run into that. I had a physicist this past year working on our team who, he had a meltdown. Like, he really did. I've been working with him since 2013, and he worked out of Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore Labs on nuclear weapon design and modeling, and knows his work very well. He's got over 90 by now, I guess, over 90 peer-reviewed papers, and he was an editor for the IEEE. And we're getting his results back from Safire, and he said there's something wrong with the experiment. And ultimately he had a meltdown. And one of the predictions that he made failed, which indicated
I got
That
you,
was my
Rick.
that was going to be one of my
I
questions. How
know.
did you break the brain of the Safire or the physicist?
Well, it's the evidence, you see. So you can't observation, replication. We can repeat all the results that we've got time and again, and we've done that. And they don't. There's no plasma physics right now that can predict the behavior of what we see going on in Sapphire and what we've recorded. And in order to do that, a physicist would have to make some predictions. So where the litmus test
Correct.
is
Yes.
this, is that if someone claims that they understand what's going on in there, then then it falls to them to make some predictions, and then we give them some basic evidence of what is happening, and they have to build a model around that, and then modify the model, and then we can go and actually test it. And one test, we were using a gas that was supposed to be extremely reactive, so much so that we had some concerns where we would actually blow the reactor up, and it actually had the opposite effect. It actually cooled the reactor down to a point where we could hardly measure thermally the responses, and it made water. And it was not supposed to do that. And so I think with that and the failure to be able to model and predict the behavior
I know
of the
how he
plant,
feels because you just broke my brain there for a second.
well, from a physics perspective, that gas should have been far more reactive, and it wasn't. And gases that we do use, the composition shouldn't be reactive, but they are. And so
But they're reactive when they're neutral, like in a neutral on the ground. But if you're inside an electric field, they would be partially aligned. Would that not make them, could be catalytic or other effects suddenly intertwine into it? Like these are thoughts that pop into my head because I know that once you start using a dipolar molecule, even water itself, has a negative end and a positive end, it will generally align, even in the field. I mean,
yeah, exactly. So,
Well,
so I would say that. Go ahead. So when
sorry,
you,
Rick.
go ahead.
Sorry, Rick here again. We know the two elements that create water.
yes.
Mhm.
So I didn't want to, you didn't mention the gas that you put in, but I surmise that it's hydrogen.
Well, we do use hydrogen. That's out in the open. We do use molecular hydrogen initially, but we have a very effective way of making monatomic hydrogen and even free protons, so we can strip the electron off. And we use other gas compositions. So another gas that's out there is we've tested deuterium, but there's other gases out there that you would consider to be not generally reactive, but in the conditions of this, what we see in Sapphire, become extremely reactive, working together with other elements. And
this
okay.
is no. You're again. This is something that we've sort of surmised. There's this like, it's weird. We often come to conclusions of things that are biblical or astrological, and we're laughing when we think about it because I'm obviously not. I'm not generally that kind of guy. But then here I come back and go, well, there's the placement of Jupiter is sort of like in harmony with the sun. It creates where we stand. We're in a field, and our field will change, and even slightly, and so forth, depending on where we are, and it is, and so on, and of course, I'm not saying and that controls your entire life or anything weird like that. But what I'm saying is that even though it seems complete poppycock in the disparate conventional sense of Jupiter is just a ball over there, gravitationally attracted to over here. There's nothing going on between them. But here we go. We send Voyager out through the heliopause, and they go, something fiery and fizzy. And you're like, and of course, I was going as electrical engineer. My thoughts were, well, the load being expressed by all the planets must be equal to the load going through the heliopause. Like it has to, current has to power that load. So that has to at least be expressed in that area, although that area is much larger. So it will be more diffuse, but it has to be the same amount of energy that all the plants are expressing. That's how, and everything in them, all their weather and everything like that. Just as an EE, the way that you think on that. But
We would tend to agree with that, I think, in principle, in the sense that nature is looking to find balance and equilibrium.
Right.
And so it doesn't mean that we also don't, the evidence that we have too is that, well, the term is centropy or negentropy. I hate the word negentropy.
Yeah.
But we're seeing
It's even more esoteric than anything else.
Well,
it almost sounds pretentious.
Well, yeah, and it's a term that scientists use because they don't have a better word for self-organizing or organizing matter, which, according to second law of thermodynamics, in the context of these things, shouldn't be possible. But we're observing them, and we're seeing this.
They don't have a right-hand rule to work with, really. So, I think have only an attracting force. I mean,
James from Seattle.
This is Diamond from the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. Is there a way to determine a mass balance in this equation? Are you actually creating more mass? Is there a way to determine that?
Great question. We showed you pictures of changes. Yeah, we've seen changes in the crystalline structure of the anode, as you've seen what we've put out on YouTube.
I've seen pictures, yes.
You're right. So you see that there's areas which look like they've been eroded down in between some of the other types of alloy that's there.
And in between the cracks, there's something else there. It seems.
Right. We know that the surface, that in between those little, like those mountains, that there was material there originally that there isn't now. Now we don't know that it's being deteriorated, but it does have that. So do we have the ability to measure those things? The answer is yes. Did we do that? And the answer is no, we did not. Not this time. We did on some of the anodes, but we've got work to do in that region. So it'll actually help us do an analysis on why it is that we're seeing elements in the optical spectra that we know aren't there, like manganese is an example. We know we don't have any of that in there, but it shows up in the atmosphere. Well, where's it coming from and how's it coming about? Is it being built, or what's going on? So is there a change in the mass of the anode? And that'll help us determine what is actually happening with an anode from, like, say, even from an engineering perspective. So this is some of the work that we're going to be looking into over the next few years, so that if you look at it from an engineering and product development.
Welcome to the November 17th edition of The Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we're proud to have our live interview with Montgomery W. Childs, President, Program Director, and Principal Scientist on the Safire Project, who will be with us to explain what this means for the electric universe and what kind of future this technology can usher in. Please take a moment to like and subscribe.
Because I'm new to this, what does me then, or?
Just a little pause.
You're good to go. That was it. We're already done it. They already saw it. It's all good. So that's how fast that was. I thought it would be much more smoother. You see how everything is just, you try to be smooth, and I just don't have it yet. But I'll get there. But still, we're back on.
Foot and nose disease.
Yes, you're right. But still, the story. You were talking about the transmutation, of course, and
right. There was a question about the mass.
That was the important part. Yes, knowing exactly what was changing, and we often talk about that here. About, well, it seems like the gas giant planets have a surface type of feeling. Like, I mean, and so obviously and comets, of course, Walt Thornhill will tell you all day about the weight discrepancy and that they're rocks, type of thing. And here we are now, again, looking at the same, sort of discrepancies, where here we are, we're finding perhaps mass changes, as you had said, or of course within elements, perhaps.
I think
that's true too. Sorry, go ahead.
Gareth here. For me, there are two parts to that mass question. One is whether the whole equipment as a whole changed the mass from before to after. So whether the effect that we see inside of that chamber is causing mass to effectively, I don't want to say that it's coming out of nothing, but that it's appearing. And the other one for me as well is that while the machine is running, is there any effect in terms of gravity or mass change due to the electric field around the machine that you were able to detect, or potentially that you may look at in the future?
Okay, so that's a great question. We see it in the plasma. We see with the plasma, we know the plasma is extremely dense. We know we have molecules, excited atoms, ions, and electrons. We have basically soup to nuts. When those plasma double layer shells are created, there is no apparent indication that they're being affected by gravitational forces at all. So we do get some, you might say, thermal buoyancy as a response on occasion, but sometimes it inverts. So we can heat up one part of the chamber at the bottom of the chamber and not the top. So we don't understand that. Now, when it comes to mass, it's a great question. I would say right now we don't have the kind of instrumentation to measure that in real time to see if there's a change, that dramatic a change in the weight of the anode, as an example. It's pretty rigid. So it's like physically rigid. It's tied right into the physical antechamber. So it's not going to move. I don't know if it would be easy to measure if there's a change, if that answers your question.
For now, it's something that I would be particularly interested in, because obviously it's the difference between whether you're transmutating what is available in the chamber or whether you are effectively, I guess, like at a quantum level, whether you're generating particles out of energy that comes into the chamber.
Oh, okay. If I understand your question, I think our position on this now is we've coined the term electric nuclear resonance. Okay, in a sense of if there's changes of a particular element, which we have evidence of, the element will change or transmute into something else. So let's just say we're splitting a particular heavy element. And when it splits, we think this may be what's going on. It's not a fission process. As such, we're not taking an axe and smashing it with a neutron to break it apart, that we know of anyway. It might be analogous to, it takes 5,000 degrees you can use like heat to separate oxygen and hydrogen in water, or you can use a 9-volt battery. See, so we think we're calling it electronuclear resonance because we think what's happening is that at certain frequencies, these atoms will break apart and catalyze. There's a catalytic event that's occurring at the same time, at the chemistry level. Is that?
But that does imply, therefore, that our understanding of the structure of the atom, or at least what holds it together, must be incorrect.
I don't know that the binding energies are incorrect. I think that because of the thermal responses that we're getting, would indicate to us that there's exothermic reaction that's occurring. So it could be that we're using, very low power for these in and around the proximity of the anode surface, and in that atmosphere there's a very large voltage drop, 1,000 volt. Well, not always 1,000. Let's say between 5 and 1,000 volts, but it's very narrow, physically very narrow band, distance. So we think that what may be happening is that it's an electrical resonance thing where the atom is being split, and then that exothermic reaction is occurring, and that's what's causing the heat in the chamber up. But we're just like, that's speculation right now.
Right,
see,
right.
So. And I'd like to put it out that that's speculation. We're not saying we know why this is happening, because right now we've talked to a lot of very good people. No one really knows why. You see.
Well, there is this discussion or this idea that, it seems to work well for, especially when you're going through paradigms, is you look at the anomalies instead of covering them up. You just look at them. Like you actually have to go to, here's a whole list, a long laundry list of anomalies. Ranging from, frogs in stone to skeletons under coal mine seams to, in this particular case, though, we're looking at what exactly is or are these particular effects, and and obviously you're trying to separate them, or at least, word I'm looking for,
ultimately
delineate them, or
yes. And we are very good at doing that. We use what's called design of experiments methodology, which I leave to your listeners and to some of you on the team to look into. It's a very sophisticated and very powerful tool that we use to understand very well the factors involved associated with these particular types of reactions, even so much so that we can resolve what's called second order interactions, or catalytic, or what might be known in the audio industry as a feedback loop, you see, that will start to build on itself, which is like a catalytic reaction. And so we can resolve for those things and take a look at...
More like an op amp.
Sorry?
Sorry, more like an op amp, like operational amplifier, keeps resonating, going up and up and up.
Right, until you start blowing fuses. Right, exactly. So we can control those things, and we can solve for those things, but we can't tell you why. Let's say an atom will split necessarily at this time, because there's not enough understood about it. But we can get to a point where we can do this now. I mean, we can get these responses repetitiously, and we have full control over the plasma all the time. So we know, which is great, because we've got a wonderful opportunity here to really explore these things, repeat the experiments, and can
I ask about full control? Like, I mean, obviously you can control the voltage, and by doing so, you would be able to control perhaps maybe the layer, how high the voltage drop surface, what would we consider, let's say, the other capacitor plate.
The voltage itself. Well, let me chime in on that.
Oh, please.
On our power supply, we call both voltage and current limiting.
Okay.
Okay. So what we do in that case is we say, what would the plasma like? So the voltage that you see is a response. So the voltage floats. Right. And the voltage itself has to do with a lot of factors with the plasma, and that has to do with its resistance and inductance and impedance and some of the other things associated with the plasma, because it's an electrical conductor, almost a perfect electrical conductor. So we let the voltage float, and that voltage drop that you'll see is fairly consistent in the sense that let's say you had the anode at 300 volts, as an example. We can see it drop right down to zero, and I mean zero, physically. So we can measure that, and we can measure that 0 point will move out physically from the anode. Maybe, I think we saw one that was almost 2 millimeters out, and then jump right back up to almost the same voltage potential as the anode. And then you have this very large positively charged region of positive charges that will have a kind of a waveform depending as to when we measure through where the double layers are, and then ultimately it will drop down to zero as it gets out into a virtual cathode. So it means that the voltage signature, and we've shown this on the videos.
You're basically controlling the dark space, the anode dark space, is a type of idea.
I would say it's not us that's controlling the dark space. It's actually the plasma that gives it the structure.
Fair enough.
Okay, and nobody knows why, but it just does. So we
well, it's every gas would be, well, we don't play with gases like you're playing with them very often. I mean, this is a new way of sort of playing with them. Like normally you would go, like we were happy just to make it glow neon, and we were cool with that. Let's leave that alone. We made some TVs and we were cool with that. Let's leave that alone, because you don't want to Hindenburg yourself, okay? Like there's a thing, you don't want to play with those things. But you're like, well, no, let's put dangerously explosive. Let's just hit some like race car fuel fumes in here, and let's put that in an electric field and see what happens. I'm not saying you're really doing that, but still, the potential. Suddenly, you're realizing things that you would go, well, that's very dangerous, but it's not in this field. It's suddenly controllable, and no one does that.
Not to
I have a question. It sounds like you guys you're talking about transmutation, and maybe you don't fully understand
casually, just some alchemy.
Yeah, I mean it's a huge concept, but it sounds almost like transportation. I mean, hasn't been ruled out. Like, are there elements of a portal that we're talking about here? I mean, is this stable plasma something that elements are arriving from out of nowhere, or are they just rearranging themselves? Or are you able to distinguish at all?
We're not able to distinguish that. I would say that being pragmatic bunch. We don't rule anything out. What we do is go for the simpler possibilities first. We have seen some strange things, and we can't account for them. But we don't rule things out like they're being created out of nothing. We wouldn't rule that out. But we'd say, okay, well, look, if we're not going to rule that out, how might we test for it? So if we can't test for it, it doesn't mean it isn't true. It just means, well, we just can't test for it. We can't say one way or the other whether or not it's occurring or it isn't occurring.
The only thing you could really do is like sort of line up theories that you know of different versions of the interior of the molecule, someone who might know that, and say which one conforms to the observations we're seeing. That might be something you can do, because like I think of Ito Cal's model and sort of like the idea of like that's why it never breaks evenly. It always breaks when you break uranium. It breaks into these two molecules almost all the time. It has basically a double bell curve, and that was never predicted. But of course, in his idea, well, yeah, because it's the weak point's right here in his idea. Like you build the structure and boom, here's the weak point. That sort of idea.
We think that Ito's.
Robert here. Speaking of Ito, he just posted a comments from I guess your presentation at the BEM. I guess they're in the comments section.
Yeah, I think that
we're getting like feedback loop in real time here.
Right. Feedback. Okay. Two gentlemen were speaking. They were slightly excited. I kind of perused through it real quick. They were slightly,
yeah. We're just talking about like this stuff the ancient Egyptians were apparently doing. No big deal. Don't worry about it. It's all cool. So, King Ramesses, continue, please. Sorry, I'm just having some fun. Don't worry.
You know what? If you guys got to know us, like if people got to really know us, we're pretty down to earth people. We got 7 grandkids, and we,
can't. Oh yes, of course, normal things.
Well, I am the grandpa they do pull out of the attic at Christmas time. Okay, so, I'm the grandpa that has a plasma ball here and a fluorescent light bulb, and I have my grandsons and my granddaughters here, and I say,
their hairs are all standing up.
Check this out, right? So I'll bring the light bulb up to the plasma ball. I say, but don't touch it. And they're holding it in their hand. Watch this. Bring it up, and it lights up in their hand. Grandpa, what's going on? I give that crazy look. I don't know. Maybe you could find out for us. We just have great conversations.
Did you just tell your grandkid to do his own research?
I did.
Attaboy.
And they have all kinds of theories rattling around in their brains, right? And it's great. It's great. They just get really excited about it. And it's so that's just kind of, it's just a little bit like who we are. We're pretty down to earth people, and we if I see any kind of pride or hubris show up on our team, I'm all over it pretty quickly. In other words, we are not, that's not who we are, that's not what we're about. We're never going there. If we don't know something, we say we don't know. If we're speculating, we'll say we're speculating. We're making assumptions. So we take an assumption, and we do make assumptions, and we put them into our model, but we have to shake them out whether or not the assumption or that particular factor is really playing a role in these particular processes or not, you see. And then
I see that.
But that's the experimental approach that we take to these things. So we're a pretty pragmatic bunch, like down to earth, like got our feet on the ground kind of thing, not even kind of thing. And actually this approach doesn't make us friends in the theoretical or academic world, because
that's incredibly reassuring, by the way.
What's that?
What you just said is reassuring.
Just that you remain grounded, and that you're able to separate your own humanity from the enormity of the science that you're engaging in, and not see yourself as the author of it, but as the observer of it. That's crucial. And we all see how devastating sort of human beings
ego is
get.
Dangerous.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
What you're doing is so crucial. Yeah, like you don't have time to get ego involved, because it's so much more important than an individual.
Well, it is, and I'm a collaborator. Like my background, I'll tell you, what's my background. I'm a licensed machinist. I'm a licensed tool and die maker, and then I went into mechanical engineering through Magna International. And they, at the time, said if you want to study something at university or college, if you get 80%, we'll cover all your tuition and books and everything else. And I was like, wow, that's cool. So I did, and then I got into applied physics, and for a number of years, and. So with the academic world, let me back up a bit. One of the crucial things that I'd like to stress with all your listeners is the methodology that we use, and that's called design of experiments. And it is, some people have heard of Six Sigma and Black Belt. Well, design of experiments is orders of magnitude beyond those as a very powerful tool. But there's a way of thinking about the way you go to do an experiment and identifying primary factors associated with it and how you might have those factors interact with each other to obtain a particular result. So in this approach, you see, where academia struggles with us is that they say, well, we have a theory, and we get approached by people who have a theory of what's going on with your plasma, and we say, okay, well, let's if you think so, let's test it. So you need to make some predictions, and that's
nice
usually
theory you have there. It'd be a shame if someone tested it.
right. That's usually often when they run out of the room waving their hands and yelling and screaming and I ran into that with one individual at the Global. He's well known, but we already know that his theories are flawed, and he just doesn't want people to know that his theories are flawed, because the moment we go to test them, they'll find out they're flawed. Well, if he's a true scientist, he's going to want to know that it's flawed. I would think.
Well, otherwise you're not doing science.
Period.
Rick here. Someone on Discord posted a response from Ito. He's got a lot of points that he makes about creating basically a solar system in the bottle, and that Safire doesn't really model the sun properly.
Does Ito say that, or someone else say that?
I think it's Ito. It looks like a picture, or it's not Ito. Eugene. Sorry, Eugene.
Oh, Bagashoff. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Bagashoff.
Yeah, I can't really say because Eugene does a lot of theoretical work, but
right.
so does Ito. We are very closely tied with Ito. We're in conversations with Ito because we think his model, as what we say in Canada, might have legs, and so
100% with you on that.
So what we do with Ito, we don't let Ito off the hook here. We say that, if you're going to be involved with us, which I think he does. I mean, I know he does. We would say there has to be what we would call material contribution to the experimental work that we're doing. And if that's the case, well then.
And there's rigor.
Yes, and so this is where we get into the capitalism business part. And I said, well, he lives a pretty Spartan life. And I said, if you're working on the team, you'd be compensated, for all your efforts. And then if you have material contribution, then we can talk about even more in the context of participating in the company, because the company is made up of the Safire team, by the way, and they're all shareholders. So that's the way we'd like to do things, so that if somebody's worked really hard on a model, provide compensation, because he's got to pay his rent and put food on the table and all the necessary things we have as human beings living in these bodies. But that's kind of the condition. It's not even kind of condition. That is the litmus test, you might say, for people to be a part of our team, especially at that high level where Ito's living. And you see, so it's not easy. That's where, as I said before, we had a physicist that had been working with us since 2013. This past year, he really had a meltdown because the current plasma physics model cannot make the predictions, and that became evident. And he had a meltdown. And
well, I mean, but to be fair, you're basically, if you are on the right path, and Ito is generally on the right path, and this idea is sort of on the right path, you are very similar to. Well, it doesn't take 2 steps before you're already challenging Einstein. It only takes 1 step before you're, 2 more steps and you're challenging Newton. Like, you're all in that, and you might as well just be, like, in a way, to someone who is grounded in the conventional paradigm, it is not unlike being a friggin' wizard. Like, I can understand, like, I
get it. Yes. Yeah. I know exactly. I get what you're saying.
And by the way, I was wrong. Hold your thought, because I wanted to let you know that I was wrong. The movie that you now resemble, since you're a machinist, is the Keanu Reeves movie Chain Reaction. You see, because they were working with volatile energy production as well. So that's what the movie was about. And there was CIA involved questioning people, just like they got you. That's how they got my brother. Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, the people I've met so far seem to be pretty much down to earth, regardless of what goes on at the upper echelons in our governments. And even though that at the political level, it's like just bad comedy.
Yeah.
There's, I would say, at the intermediate level, and I've met some pretty, I would say, decent people, and that they really have a heart to make sure they do good work, and they have a strong sense of obligation and responsibility to, like, say, in America, to the American people, that they spend their money wisely and that they're doing good work. And I know that now. Right. So it doesn't mean that there isn't these clandestine things that go on behind the scenes.
Oh, I was just speaking, I sort of make fun of the idea that everything is a conspiracy, because obviously it isn't. Some people are just not in the paradigm that you're in. My good friend Jim, who's with us right today, he was like, why does the Thunderbolts not ever look at the CPAC work? Because if they did, they would notice this stuff. And I go, because you're the one that noticed it. No one else did. You're the only one in the entire world who has figured this out. It is now your job to tell people about it, because you figured it out. I know it's a responsibility, but it's kind of weird in that sense. It's the same thing. Now that you've discovered it, you want to repeat over and over again. That's what they did in the old days. He just kept on climbing that tower over and over again, dropping balls over and over and over again, until finally it was like, they drop at the same speed. Really? Yeah. Like
Monty, as Gareth here, I've got a question for you. So in the bits you've sort of discussed so far, you've kind of identified that there are some big gaps in terms of our understanding, in terms of the science behind what might be happening inside of the reactor. Mm-hmm. And you've already said that, your physicist has had a meltdown and walked away. You're potentially in talks with Edo, but that's not necessarily confirmed. So my question is, what are you going to do moving forward to try and understand those gaps in the science?
Okay, so there's two very different parts here. One is the experimental work that we do, which really, whether or not our physicist was right or wrong, has nothing to do with the responses that we get, and we don't need them to do that work. We don't need a nuclear chemist or a physicist to be on the team for us to continue on with our work. See, because that's the understanding of what was going on. So because of that's why I'm suggesting that many of your readers or the people that or listeners, if they take a look at even Wikipedia for under design of experiments, it's a methodology, and it's a very powerful methodology, experimental methodology, that we can elucidate. We could tell you definitively exactly what kind of precise gas composition that we need in ratios under these particular conditions, under these pressures, here to repeat and obtain these particular elements. So we don't need them to do that. What they would be on the team for is to gain a better understanding of what's going on. Like why? Okay, so we suspect that we're splitting certain heavy elements. Right. We know that it's not fission in the conventional sense, in the sense that we're smashing it with high speed neutrons, as an example.
Using high explosive detonations, yada yada, or whatever.
Right. So we can repeat these experiments, and we can repeat the responses that we're getting. But to understand why or how it is under these conditions that these things happen is, I would say, we could be 5 or 6 or 7 years, I'm just guessing here right now, away, which, in my opinion, this is my view on it right now, we're going to need nuclear chemists, nuclear engineers, plasma physicists to collaborate. I think there's going to be a whole new mathematics that comes out of this. And people like Ito, as an example, if his model has legs, which we think it may very well have, you see. So if he's got his model, well, then maybe the problem's already solved, you see. So what does that lead to? Ultimately, it leads to optimization. So how do you know how much, as an example, if you have a fission reactor, how much refined uranium do you need for you to get the reactions that you get, or why do they occur? So you have a theoretical model. How can I say this? As an example, here maybe this will help. I have a thermodynamics model making certain predictions on how efficient your engine is running. You see, that math has matured based on the experimental work that's been done on engines. Okay, so it's like that. So we do the experimental work, we get the results back, and because we can repeat the experiments and we can tell you it takes this much of this and this much of this under these particular conditions to create that, that'll help them create a model. Then they need to make a prediction, say, okay, let's change what we're doing in here, and we should expect this result.
Yeah, I totally get that, but obviously what it does need is those people to come in and be able to sit and analyze the data to go, okay, this would be based on what you're seeing, this would be my prediction, and if we change this, I would predict that.
Yes.
And that's what you're sort of looking to do further down the line.
Well, yeah, and I don't think there's any way of escaping it. It'd be like Madame Curie when she discovered X-rays, and at the time, physicists said she was nuts, and she just gave up on academia and trying to get into useless disputations with them and just carried on with her work. But it wasn't until years later that they discovered that she was right. Then they start working on the math, and maybe X-ray technology can mature more quickly. See?
Wait. There's actually a quote from that movie, Chain Reaction, 1997, where Keanu Reeves said, and I can't believe I just remembered this, where he said to Rachel Weisz, she goes, well, did you model it? Or something like that. And he goes, actually, no, I was too busy building it. And that's the sort of the engineer thing that I appreciate about the electric model of the universe itself. Like obviously we can't have this conversation without everyone in our audience and of course ourselves and half the people here. These in our head, it's rolling where we're thinking about, okay, well, what does this have implications for planetary life? What did it have to do in the past? How does this change our view of recent history? What does it change for all of that? I mean, obviously, we don't have to go into detail specifically unless we want to, but you can see how it does. Just what you're saying is basically the transmutation of the elements. We've confirmed the electric sun model, but now we can see that we can actually make it rain, or we can, water will come out of this, or this will come out of that, or, and you weren't expecting it, but here it is. And we do have some sort of, as you could say, it sort of harkens back to people going, well, it was really wet back then, and water just started pouring down everywhere. The plants seemed to be available. It was just constantly raining. And that's some of the talk about the way that the way that the plants and animals were able, that they seem to be. That's the way that the world was. That they were made for that kind of world. And,
okay, that's an interesting question, because what we see here, and this is why we could, if we give a lecture, if we give a talk, we could probably talk for 4 hours. But one of the key things that Michael brought up was the interstellar medium. And
yes,
we were literally sitting in my garage in preparation for the talk and bath. And he's going through the interstellar medium, and he's going through the non-organic element, case I think is 11. And it turns out the Safire produces 9 of them. And right now, from what we can tell, they're not radioactive isotopes. They're just the base elements. I mean, we've got more work to do on that. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I said to Michael, Michael, I don't think our sun does, but do you know if our sun produces any radioactive materials? And we thought about it for a minute, and he did a few things, and we said, actually, I don't think it does. It looks like our universe produces elements that are necessary for life. You see? And that's a big deal, I think, personally. So Safire right now doesn't look like it wants to produce anything that's harmful to life. We're not seeing any evidence of it at all.
Oh.
So do you think that the sun and your experiments are exactly aligned, or do you see some things that are in the experiments that you're doing that are obviously not what's happening on the sun? Do you have a list? I mean, obviously it's a huge list of this is exactly like the sun works, based on modeling. Is there a shorter list of things that the Safire is doing that don't seem to be related to the sun at all?
We haven't found any disparities between the two yet.
That's amazing.
Not yet.
That's
I mean, we're
powerful.
looking. It's important for your listeners to understand. The EU community invited me to do an evaluation on their model. I at the time, I didn't care if it was electrical or gravitational, and I was doing research into my own energy and my other companies that I own, and I get brought on to do. Well, let's say it this way: it might be analogous to you inviting the IRS to come to your home and do an audit on all your books on your business to make sure you haven't made any errors. That was our job. I thought it was pretty brave of them to do that with us. You see?
Well, they needed it. It was crucial.
Yeah, we're not part of the EU.
Yeah.
Like, we were an independent research lab brought on to do an evaluation and test their model.
You're like the Mormon that came knocking at the door and got converted to Christianity.
So, I talked to Wall about that, and I said, you should let your audience know this, because it's like, well, gee, we're all friends. Well, actually, we're not. We applied what's called null hypothesis to the model, and we haven't been able to demonstrate that there's anything in their claims that are incorrect. Nothing. So when we got the transmutation this past year and the anomalous heat response, that's when I was willing to put my name behind it and say, right now, I would be convinced that the electric force in nature is the primal, if not one of the primal forces in nature that drives our universe. Officially, I would say that now. I wasn't able to say that and in good conscience until this past year. Like doing a plasma.
That takes a while. It's not readily apparent. I mean, I went to school again to make sure that I was like, I'm not making crap up, am I? No, I'm not making crap up. No, this is real. I'm not. Yeah. This is real, right? Like, because it's hard to take that step because there's a part of you that goes, this is a bit crazy. Like, in the sense that, like, I could sit there and logically have an argument with someone about the Great Flood in all seriousness without mentioning a Bible story. And that's not something that would normally just be, it's not a normal conversation. Because it doesn't, people are so hammered into their belief structures and they try to separate them. And this is not about belief. This is about basically going, no, the rules here are such that this gaseous electric force seems to make molecules act in certain ways, which seems to, especially on surfaces of some of these balls, turn them into different structures and different material altogether, and fling some of this back out into space.
It's not a matter.
And you said conducive to life, as you said. Maybe not that life is conducive to us, like viruses could kill us and so forth, but you know what I mean? Like, life itself seems to be conducive to this environment, or whatever the word.
Yes, I would say that.
So are you talking about like the puddle fitting in the hole kind of a thing? Like, everything is designed around what exists. So is that kind of how you start to see it?
Myself personally, it's like this. We live on planet Earth, and all the biosystems that we have, or the systems that we have in play, are necessary for life. They're not antithetical to life. And so it's a symbiotic relationship in a sense that it's like the Earth needs living things, and the living things, you need both. They're interactive. They're not separate. It's not like, well, one is, it's interconnected. And I would say that the evidence that we would have right now from a philosophical perspective would be that the universe produces all the elements necessary for life. And it's almost like, if you got rid of the fish in the sea, I think that you would have a problem with the sea.
Yeah.
So it's like the universe needs us as much as we need the universe. That would be a philosophical perspective, and that the two are symbiotic. And what we're trying to do as human beings, I think, is trying to find a balance so we don't destroy we're not antithetical to the universe. See, as opposed to, the other way around. I don't think it needs to be this thing where that's just the evidence. The interstellar medium is producing elements that are necessary for life.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's producing life. I don't know that anybody really understands that. Okay.
No,
but
you're right, and I'm just saying you're
James-
right. We could just be a dancing electromagnetic field effect that happens to occur on the surfaces of certain planets with, like I don't know. That's like what life could be for if you thought about it as an engineer. Like you could say, oh yeah, we see that kind of effect on top of welding spheres when we use arc welders sometimes. It's ridiculous. Of course, I'm talking completely crazy, but the end result is that the effects that we see sometimes, like in engineering terms, are, well, that's what led to the electric universe in the first place in a lot of ways. It's like they say electron rain, and we want to punch them. Like
James.
Neil, I think James
Seattle.
wants to say, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. What you're talking about is materialism, and they don't want to give that up because if the Earth is a dead thing, as they hold it to be, then they can do anything they want to it, and because it's a dead corpse, so you can cut it up and consume it. It doesn't matter. You don't have to consider any of those things. And the vested interests of the world are holding on to this. And the other thing is that consciousness is denied. So the interconnectedness of the electric charge around in the cosmos has to be denied. Their models must deny these things in order to hold on to their paradigm.
whoa, you blew my mind there for a second, because when you think about it, then what you're doing is just by chopping pieces of the land out, you're changing it for the land for everybody on the planet. And when you pollute it, you're changing it for everyone on the planet, because you're changing the resonance, you're changing the gas context, and so on, as Safire would predict, or has shown. Sorry. When you change the gas, different effects start happening, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes, some of them can be catalytic. Well, they are in some cases, in both directions. One will kill the reactions, and the other will actually cause, as I've shown, extremely high rates of reactions and radiation emissions. Not radioactive, but radiation emissions.
Of course, yes. They're different ballgame, guys.
James, again, I lost my thought. Sorry.
Well, just to get back to your thought on materialism, our perspective would be that, like, we wouldn't hold to climate change or not hold to climate change. We know that climate change, as an example, has occurred many times in the past, according to the historical records. What we would say is that, why would it be important, as an example, to do the work we're doing with Safire for energy? And it's not just energy. What we should talk about today is remediation of nuclear waste as well. But why do that? Well, I had a farm, and I did it kind of like for therapy, and I had animals, and we lived out in that world. And we're very strongly oriented towards what we would call good stewardship. So you don't destroy the earth, because it's where you get your food from. It's how we live. So it's like, well, if you can come up with a technology that's not going to pollute the world, well, that would be a good thing. And if you can make it commercially viable, well, that's even a bigger plus. So you don't put that burden on people where they have to pay more, which are just trying to hold body and soul together in many cases. It needs to be commercially viable. And so if you can do that, it's nothing but good. But we don't get onto the bandwagon of causes, in the sense of whether or not we're for or against climate change, as an example. We are on, you might say, committed to good stewardship and honoring the world that we have around us. I think it's what we would call love, right? You don't destroy the thing that you love. That's just not good. So maybe that's more of a philosophical perspective the core team holds to.
No, I think I think we all hold to that.
Yeah.
Well, in Canada, that's for sure. I'm sure a lot of the places in the world feel the same.
Yeah, and I think the world, for good or bad reasons, is ready for new technologies to be brought to bear that may help in these particular areas.
Well, yeah, it's. I mean, we've already shown. I mean, there's Quebec. I think doesn't even use it has like what, maybe 2% fossil fuel, like coal plants, and that's it. Everything else is like renewable.
Well,
like that's.
but that's true, but they're also blessed with probably the largest hydroelectric infrastructure in the world.
Oh God, yes.
Okay, so for them to be held up as being, oh well, we need to do what Quebec is doing. Well,
no. It's not plausible to do it everywhere, obviously, but that type of large project, though, just because that large project is now, you know, a wind farm on the ocean or something, or taking advantage of something like that, with the new technologies brought to bear that are longer lasting, and you know, that type of thing. You know, you could do a lot of good work. I will let you know, and why not? The opportunity's there.
Yeah, exactly.
If nothing else, you're not putting more crap in the air. Like, just because if I would breathe easier knowing that my children will breathe easier. Like that's it, just alone. That doesn't really mean like I really have to agree with the climate change ideas. In fact, I would hazard to guess that, electrically speaking, there is likely an overriding force that seems to be controlling this above what their models seem to be predicting, much like meteorology itself, why they can only predict so many days in advance.
Well, I think the historical model on climate change, to me personally, from a science perspective, is a fairly short time frame. I mean, I couldn't use because it takes years to do these measurements.
Right. Yeah.
If you compare to what we do in Safire in a day, might take 200 years if you compared it, stretched out the kind of results that you get, and you can track historically, is a very small model to say, okay, well, we're going to make predictions from this. I would say that's a tough one for me, you know, to accept that that's the legitimate model in that context. So I would question that personally. You know. So
James, this is the third time transmutations have been discovered. The first time being, of course, the plants and their roots changing elements in the soil, and then the human body
the
itself.
Chicken egg thing. Yeah.
Well, anyway, the physicists have had a long time to reconsider their bonding, the shells, the atoms and particles itself. I don't think they exist. I think they're just flows and vibrations. Because when you go into the lab and you look into it, the deeper you go, the more emptiness you find. So it's
you may literally be right.
I think I am, but that's just my opinion, because I don't have a lab like some people have.
Well, no, that's actually at least you said that at the end. That's my opinion. That means I want to test my theory. Gosh darn it.
Well, there's like one of the directors, senior director of CERN and BNL. He just gave a talk recently. They're starting to ask some serious questions about how all this comes about, and we know that the double slit experiment is it a particle, is it a wave, is it both? You know,
right.
What's going on? So there's a lot of questions that I think with this particular individual will open up the discussion. And I think it's healthy. Sometimes you have to fail, and sometimes you have to fail big in order for us to realize we just failed at something.
But there's no point in continuing on with a mistake we made 100 years ago and say, nope, we're too proud to change. We're just going to drive ourselves right off this cliff. What the heck is the point of that? We're not going to make predictions anymore. We're just going to say this is the truth.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Well, I think it goes to human nature.
It is a bit of that, obviously. Hero worship, you know.
Well, that, and I think the insecurity of not knowing. A lot of people.
True. There's a good blanket there.
Well, you know, I'm old enough to. I've watched. I've had very large teams, and I've observed people's behavior, and you know, when people get faced with something that they don't know, and maybe the job depends on it, you know, they're going to respond just naturally, and sometimes not in the best way either. So I think it's hard to live in the security of not knowing that you don't need to know anything really. It's just the questions that matter, and it's hard to formulate good questions.
That's profound.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. If you start learn to ask new questions by thinking different ways. I mean, goes for everything. I mean, even Noam Chomsky, I think the syntactic structures, his big thing was learn what you can't say. Like learn the unwritten rules of language. The things you're not that you cannot, like you literally physically cannot come out of your mouth. Like when you start realizing what your limitations are, what the brain will organize, you're starting to sort of trace around whatever it is that you can't understand, and you can start seeing it from different points of view. And that's sort of, in a way, what you're doing here. I mean, you went with this model and you were like, okay, well, it seems to have passed. Well, what are the implications of this model? Well, it would imply this, this, and this. Okay, well, transmutation would happen on the surface, right? Yeah, okay, well, let's see what happens. And
Yeah.
just poke at that constantly with different variables going through the entire spectrum. I mean, this is how we figured out shortwave radio bounced off of the ionosphere. We didn't. We figured by trying different bands until finally that one went around the world. You know, like these type of things happened because we tried. I mean, someone had to eventually cross down beyond where they could see the North Star when they were sailing down the coast of Africa.
Right.
And they were like, well, what's on the other end of this? I have no friggin' idea. Here we go.
Have to be brave. You have to be brave.
Yeah.
You have to be brave enough, and there's a certain, we can get into some of my own personal sides, but I'd prefer not that for the audience. I don't use this as an opportunity to express those things, because the work we do is science. But you have to be, brave enough to go into those waters, unknown waters. I was most comfortable when I was sailing and I couldn't see the coastline when we were racing or doing things, which you have no point of reference necessarily except for your navigation, which is pretty sophisticated now. But back in the old days, you didn't have that. And before longitude, it was just terrible. A lot of boats crashed, and
Yeah.
and you have to be brave if So there's another thing too that with Safire that we've uncovered as well, and that's ability to remediate nuclear waste.
I was going to actually hold that thought. There's a bunch of people who want to talk, so we have a bunch of questions that are going to line up for that because they obviously have some questions. So if Duff, if you could grab while Rick's moderating the chat and finding some questions, could you just pick out some gems for us in the next few minutes there? But I want to hear the rest of this little tale first, if you don't mind.
Neil, actually,
yes,
I have some audience questions ready and waiting.
Oh.
When you're ready to go, just let me know. And
okay, well then switch
also,
roles if you don't mind. Then
also, Smash or Mash was one of my questions, but he's here, and I'm going to give him the floor after Monty's done talking.
Well, you guys are already handling everything behind the scenes perfectly, guys. Thank you so much. What am I doing? Apparently,
it takes a village.
Yeah, it takes a village. There we go.
Yeah.
Much love, bros. Okay, so your story then, Monty. You were going on. We'll let Rick take over in when you're done. So.
No, it's okay. Like if your audience, I think that I'm easy. We can go.
Well, nuclear waste remediation is probably much better than drilling holes in mountains in Nevada and filling them full of salt.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Well, there's tests done at MIT and then Poland and other places right now. We've been able to.
You mentioned that you were with MIT.
Well, yeah, we gave a lecture there or talk back in February. We didn't know this at the time. But there was tests that were done at MIT a few years back. But we know if radioactive material is exposed to hydrogen isotope nuclei or monatomic hydrogen in a plasma, it'll increase the decay rate significantly. And ultimately, the final element, as I think it was lead-206. So the nice thing about a plasma is that it's bloody hot too. So as an example, remediating nuclear waste, it doesn't have to be refined uranium or anything like that. Or it'll also generate heat, so you can turn a turbine with it as well while you remediate it. So that's something that we're going to go after. Now, we do have to work with governments on that for obvious reasons, because these materials are controlled and they need to be controlled. But over the next few years, that's going to be one of our primary objectives, along with the energy side. So both will produce energy, looks like right now. And one could be benign in the sense that it's not radioactive in nature. We don't have to deal with radioactive material, which you've seen on the videos. And the other is that you could use radioactive material in there. And it may likely require some, I'm going to say, configuration of the material itself to prepare it for the reactor. But nevertheless, yeah. So we think that's pretty cool ourselves.
I'd say so.
Yes, that's pretty amazing.
So well, the idea of I mean, literally. I mean, well, actually, that's kind of scary in a way, because because this is what we always do, right? When we figure out a technology like this, like, oh, no, it's okay if we destroy the coastline, because we can just use our Star Trek technology invented by Monty to go clean up the mess.
Yeah. I know. I've heard that argument as well.
Don't get me wrong. I want the technology no matter what. So
yes, and you know what? Technology has been used like that since technology's been getting developed. It doesn't matter if it's the wheel or not. It could be used for good or it could be used for bad.
Well, yeah, sometimes it's a lubricant to get people to do whatever they already wanted to do anyway.
Right. So what we see is that you've got fission reactors around the world. So maybe you set up a number of Safire reactors beside it, and as the fuel's being used up, you give it to the Safire reactor, and it basically eats the garbage. And
makes more energy?
Yeah. It would do that, definitely. Yeah.
That basically using the fuel as fuel to eat itself, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, kind of like what a thorium reactor does. It just uses up whatever atomic fuel that has been placed in it and renders it inert.
Actually, Rick, there you go. Number one. You can as soon as we get ready, because this is the thing I was going to think about. You just brought this up. Thorium reactors. I hear all about this. People go yap. Is that even a thing? Like, yes. I mean, is it actually viable? Because I hear.
Yes, it is.
I hear. Well, yeah, but I hear, and then I don't hear. Like, I'm not sure why I don't hear this more.
Well, the reason why I'll explain why they don't use thorium reactors is because they do not produce materials that can be used in other, like, medical. It just uses everything up.
They're not
and
breeders.
Doesn't.
Is what you're saying. Well, I mean, there's a term for that.
They're not as economical as these type of
reactors. Is stuff that does that. I think is I might be wrong on that, but I think that's what they're used for. There's different types of nuclear reactors. I've only done a few calculations with them. It's not exactly like I'm a nuclear scientist.
Go ahead, Monty. You were going to say.
Well, no, I was just agreeing with you. I was just saying that people think that, okay, well, the uranium ultimately to make weapons, that was one, but there's other things as well, as you're saying. I know one guy in Washington right now that actually headed up Oak Ridges, and I would say that I'm just agreeing. I'm just agreeing with you is really kind of where I'm at. I think the bigger thing is that I think it falls to all of us to hold the governments accountable. If they just said, well, we're just going to make more, fission reactors because we've got this technology, I don't know if that's viable. So we have to hold them accountable to say, okay, well, if we're going to do this, why do we need to do it? Can we use other technologies instead of that?
Well, if you think about it, this is what I'm looking at Safire as. I'm looking at Safire as, that piece of technology that allowed us to realize how much power how much we could gain in power by using a state change in a steam engine. Like when we were able to actually realize that if we can cool down something and change it into a liquid again, that amount of energy is such a significant amount of energy that it will create a significant amount of suction, and therefore create, you can basically keep doing this over and over again, creating, of course, that was a steam engine, but that also became like refrigeration and everything else that we've used that particular technology for by refining it over and over again. And at the beginning, it was a piece of crap. I mean, the technology itself, he didn't use 2 tanks. He only used 1 tank, so he had to cool down that whole tank, and the efficiency, of course, would be lost. By using a dump tank, it was always staying cold, and they just dumped hot gas into it that suddenly, boom, it would compress straight down, and suddenly you got that power. And this became the thing that drove the piston. Well, this is what I'm saying is that you're not even at the 1 piston locomotive part of engine with regards to Safire. You're at the, hey, you know what? If I make an explosion, I could drive a piece of wood across or if I make an explosion, I could throw an anvil in the air, is what you're at, is what I'm saying. Compared to turning that into an entire technology, because basically once you start using it, you're going to start seeing multiple different applications. Is basically my thoughts.
Okay, well, I would say we're a little further than that, only because.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
at least you understand my scale.
I do. I get it. I mean, I really get it. I'm dealing with investors right now, and a prospectus, and it's like, well, how can you make this claim? Well, we can tell you right now that
I'm ready to give you sales pitches anytime for any of your investors.
I'm sorry?
I'm ready to give sales pitches for you anytime to your investors, so don't worry. They can watch this anytime, guys. Thumbs up.
They need to see that it's viable. So here's the deal. We already know how to make boilers and we know how to turn turbines, so we don't need to invent that technology.
There you go. We get that already.
That's off the table. So that's easy for us to deal with. It's actually a pretty straightforward engineering exercise. And so we've already got a patent on that reactor. Okay. So that we just don't know maybe how big does the anode need to be? How big does the thermal chamber need to be, based on particular elements or sizes. So that's, part of the research we're doing over the next 3 years. So we already know we can build the engine. It's just a matter of, well, how big an engine do you need? Or maybe it's like this. It's like, okay,
you've got an engine or a motor? Well, because a motor's electric and an engine's mechanical, but they're both. It has aspects of both because it requires the gases and mechanicals to be at certain pressures, and therefore, but it also requires electricity. It's like a combination. What is there a word in French like that for when it's both?
We call it a reactor.
The Safire reactor. There we go. Yeah. Okay.
So
this is the first time I've ever heard of it referred to as a reactor, but you're right.
Okay, in essence, it's interesting because the global BEM is when we first disclosed and we showed where we're going with this. And so as soon as that video comes out in the next few weeks, people will be able to watch it and see, I see where you guys are going. And it doesn't matter what material we burn in there, whether it's radioactive or base metals or base alloys.
Sorry, if I'm just Christopher Lloyd is in my head now, going through the garbage, grabbing some beer, and then throwing it into the back of the DeLorean with a banana peel, and then closing it up and saying, plutonium, we don't need that anymore.
No. So, yes, I wouldn't say I don't have enough confidence to say that. Okay, I don't know if we're going to throw banana peels in there.
No, but in essence, though, I'm realizing you could use anything. Or at least if you knew.
Okay, so here's the deal on that. We've run different materials through there. All the materials we've run right now will all have transmutation so far. Some of them are far more reactive than others. So
I'm sorry, I'm just picturing Michael Claridge just pouring a bunch of whiskey in the top of it, like, see what this does.
Oh yeah, yeah. Michael is. It's great. You need guys like that on the team. He's really good. He is really good. And
well, no, he's a gem. I've learned more from him than, he's brilliant.
Yeah, he is, and that's what makes our team. I think, in my opinion, makes our team good is because we're so diversified. Paul Anderson takes care of design of experiments, and he is like the team anchor, you might say. And Michael, he gets these harebrained ideas between Michael and myself. So Paul kind of anchors the two of us, and which is great. And yeah.
Well, I saw some pictures there. I couldn't I'm not sure where I got the footage, but and yes, Rick, can go ahead. But I saw the footage of you, and you were all sort of laughing there, and Michael was there, and I think Wall was there. I'm not sure what video it was, but I sort of saw you all in. Maybe it was one of your promotional videos or something. It was, but maybe it was Gareth's video. I'm not sure, but I just saw that that little scene, and you were laughing, all laughing at a joke or something, and then Michael comes right up to the camera, and he's like doing something, and you can, like he's right up to there, like he walked close to it, so his like head is huge. He's like, I thought that was just like a human moment in there. I couldn't hear what you were saying, but clearly you were enjoying yourselves.
In the lab, we have a lot of human moments. I want to tell you, like there's sometimes, what do you mean we just sprang a leak in the ISO chamber? Like it's like, are you kidding me? This is going to cost us $30,000 to run this weekend, and this is Friday afternoon, and so now we shut down, and so you can imagine it'd be like, we got to have this fixed. We have to have this fixed now, and all the stores are closed. It's like, now what? So there's
God, and I thought it was hard to find an HDMI cable after 10.
Well, exactly. So that's what happened. So what do you mean we just drove the probe right into the anode and we just destroyed $10,000 probe? And it's like we have to have it made up by like in the next couple hours because we got to run tests and the guys are waiting. It's like,
yeah, that's how much current could that probe take? Well, not that much.
No pressure.
No pressure.
No, we blew one up, actually. It was interesting. We're not sure exactly why it did that, but it just blew it apart. And
you heard about that crater that was formed by a lightning bolt just the other day? 15 feet wide, 3 feet deep.
Oh, I heard something about that. Yeah.
Well, it's just when you're.
It was in Dallas, Fort Worth, in a gas station.
In November. How close are we to Kennedy?
No, it was. I think it was like right at the end of October. I think it was right before Halloween, and they actually verified it because I just wrote about this because it was the Fort Worth Fire Department spokesperson actually said that the video footage from the gas station actually caught the lightning bolt hitting the power.
I saw that video footage.
And it blasted through 6 inches of concrete, and it was a 15-foot by 15-foot crater.
Wow. Wow. Just when we think it's safe to go back in the water, just as when we think that we understand everything, Mother Nature just says, okay, guys, gals, everyone, I've got some lessons for you to learn here.
Yeah.
Look at this.
Let me tell you what a Townsend avalanche looks like. A Tau.
Right. Imagine if that lightning stroke had been sustained for like 7 seconds, where they say, because they actually can go that long.
You probably have a Lichtenberg figure somewhere, very large.
Right.
Anyway,
so you mentioned something about your guests. Have some questions?
I was about to say, Rick, please. We have.
Okay. I was just waiting for the right time to break in again and
No. We're obviously having a good time, but at least it was on our brains. So please go on. Well, I want to hear what these lovely people have to say, and please thank them very much, guys. I know that we haven't been normally we would talk to them a bit more, but I'm just fascinated that you're here, and we just want to dive right into questions. So don't think I'm ignoring you guys. I mean, much love to you all.
Banana Split, and sorry we can't name off everybody that's here, but thank you all for being here. We would like to hear from Monty as much as possible, so we're going to start throwing questions at him from the audience.
Not too hard. Let's sort of softball.
I'll bring
Daniel.
Daniel, it can be as hard a questions as you guys want.
Daniel, aka Smash-O-Mash, has a question. Go ahead, Daniel.
Right. Well, can I do a sound check? I haven't spoken at all.
5 by 5.
Sweet. All right. So, regarding the implications of the Safire Project on standard cosmology, which is the idea that the heavy elements are made in gravity-induced shells inside stars. What do you think the implications of that are as far as, cosmology goes? Because regarding whenever new science comes out, I'm always interested in what the overall implications are. So do the heavy elements come from within stars, or do they come from the surfaces of stars?
Well, that's a great question. I would say Walt Thornhill and I have discussed this a number of times, and where they're seeing a supernova where the heavy elements are on the inside, which counters, I guess, the current or existing paradigm, or the existing model, where they say, well, the lighter elements should be on the inside, and it's like they've turned themselves inside out. Now, as far as Safire is concerned, I don't know. We know that it's making heavy elements. I wouldn't say we know right now whether or not it's making them in the atmosphere, or whether or not, we just don't know. I wouldn't say we've been able to like run that kind of a test to validate the claim on the electric universe with respect to that or not. I don't know how we would do that, actually, even. So.
Sure, and you know what really the implications of it are, do we need for a fusion core inside of the sun to create heavy elements? How about that? That's kind of a more.
I would say right now the evidence that we have with Safire in this recent year, it wasn't that we just had heavier elements or other elements being formed on the surface of the anode, but we've been able to verify that in fact there's heavy elements being produced in the atmosphere. For sure.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's
when you say
on the surfaces of the sun, then yeah.
So what we're saying, when I say heavy elements, even though manganese is not relatively heavy compared to some, it's a lot heavier than hydrogen.
Right, and of course it's considered a metal. You know, anything heavier than helium.
Right. So, and we know that for sure, and that was in our presentation in Bath, and as well as the Global BEM in Amsterdam last week. So we've been able to verify that. Plus, we have a lot of other atomic emissions that we don't know what they are. We do know that they exist. We can bring them up, and we can make them disappear. So we can make them happen on command. And we know that, and we can replicate that. So those.
No, go on. No, I didn't mean to.
So the reason why we're saying we don't know what they are, some of the energies, like the relative intensities and the EV numbers, are in some cases so high they're under normal conditions that you need an extremely high thermal or kinetic energy to bring them about. So it's not that we don't believe the numbers, we just can't validate them, because if they exist in the context of Safire, we would say that they would exist because of non-thermal energies, like it doesn't follow the Boltzmann's distribution, which is a thermal model of how those elements would get there. We know that right now we don't think it fits within Safire, so we don't know we know they're there. We know what some of the numbers are, we just can't validate them yet to say, yes, that's in fact what it is. So as an example, let's say we get nickel 4, or we get titanium, because we get titanium as an example, and then there's an ionized state of titanium that's extremely high. How do you from a kinetic or standard model justify that element being there? It's not that it isn't there, we just haven't been able to validate that, but we have been able to validate the manganese for certain. So that's one, but there's a whole bunch in there, and that's in the atmosphere, it looks like.
Okay, and
that's amazing.
One other thing about the composition of the surface of the anode, how drastic are the differences in the kind of elements that you're going to find unexpectedly when you change the material that the anode's made out of?
We're seeing titanium and calcium across the board.
Okay, all right.
With all of them. And they all happen within particular regions that have been, you might say, disrupted on the surface. With some of the other alloys that we're using, we're seeing far more exotic elements, like whole range, like cerium and lanthanum are the two most unusual ones that we see. And we had them validated by a third, like a lab that the US DoD recommended we use, that their subcontractors use. EMSL Microanalytical. So they're, the big company that's just kind of like all they do. They found the same elements we found, plus they found 2 more. So
not like the entire periodic table, but essentially the whole range of elements that we see in cosmology.
Yeah, the non-organics, yes, 9 of the 11 plus right. Some others. But we're just getting warmed up.
Yeah, just at the beginning, you guys haven't figured out what gases and do what, and you're just starting all of this, right, Monty?
Yes, I mean we just cracked open the door, and the door itself says that this is, in my view, something that we have to go down this road now, and I'm convinced of that. Otherwise, like last year, I was going to shut the experiment down until we saw the transmutation. That was the key for me. That was enough for me at that point in time to say, well, this is a worthwhile project. We need to move ahead on this thing, and for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, that would be a biggie for sure.
I just realized that's
well,
you're also dealing with every type of atom too. Like, I mean, not just each element itself being in the chamber, but each combination of each element, and of course the molecules each one makes. You
Yep.
have an almost infinite amount of stuff. Basically, what you're kind of, and I hate to sound actually kind of like big on this, but suddenly I just realized it's sort of like almost a new science. Instead of basically using electrically neutral chemistry, this would be electrically induced chemistry almost, because even if you're not making transmutation, you would still be aligning chemicals inside electric fields, and they become neutralized and no longer explodey if you use certain fields. I mean, that has properties beyond the Safire Project and energy generation. I mean, if we electrify a certain field, we can turn kerosene to non-explosive. Then let's put that around every friggin' one of them. You know, like, I mean, get my meaning?
Yeah, I hear
saying,
you.
Neil. Sorry, saying, Neil, is
dampening
Safire
field.
is
You make
using the
damping fields
building.
from Star Trek.
Safire is using the building blocks of the atomic structure to make everything.
No, that's what. But yeah, this is dampening field technology from Star Trek. Put a damping field around that fire. Doot. Go ahead and turn off that fuel. Doot.
Well, what is
Or
happening?
metaphasic shielding.
No, stop.
Well, you're saying
crazy
that. You're
stuff.
saying, okay, so what you want to do, the best video that we have out on that would be the one that we gave in Bath on dark mode plasma, where it is structured.
Yeah,
Now,
I saw. I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, it is in fact structured. All the plasmas we have in there are structured in that context. So what's happening as well is we know that certain elements are being sequestered towards the anode. We also know that too
Lorentz force, I assume.
Well,
and of course Markland convection.
Well, there's all kinds of ideas.
I mean, we know the Lorentz force is real. I mean, we're not arguing there, but
and it's also segregating the elements in the atmosphere.
Well, that's like it's sorting a geode type of thing.
It's sorting them out. So,
and we wonder why there are layers on the Earth. Yeah.
so in that, I mean, the process that we would say is occurring is what we're coining the term electronuclear resonance. And the reason why we're saying that is we're not saying that it's linear or fission or fusion or these other things, but some other process that's occurring in that context.
Frequencies and vibrations,
as we would say. Yes. Well, it's
and
like a whole new science in a way. I'm just saying, like, we could do so much work with that. Please go on.
And that's story.
I actually have something to add to that real quick, please. Because
no problem,
Wall
Robert.
actually spoke to me in my interview with him in 2017, because I had that analcime sample from a People Dome. I was kind of I was in the other room from you guys, and I spoke to Paul briefly, and I kind of mentioned, because I had a spectroscopy samples from an X-ray diffraction, and Wall had actually mentioned that it was possible that there could be some implications of us in the Safire, and I really had no idea what that could have been. And when I spoke to Dr. Claridge in a previous episode, I was so excited. I think I spoke so fast, nobody understood what single word I said. But I actually have enhanced the charts that I have with the samples and the numbers that actually show that it's an analcime, and I think it's like a Na, sodium, aluminum. I think it's a disodium hexyl oxygen with the water in it. But he was mentioning that the geode effect and how it occurs in space. And I mentioned the Bruce Laybourne, the samples that I have in the charts, and I think he had sent it to you guys. And I just wanted to make sure if he had sent it, did it help at all, or was it just absolutely, useless?
Oh, I know what he was talking. I got an email from Bruce a few months ago that he was working on something with back to I think the thing that you're talking about right now. Now, I had not done anything with it because I was so tied up with what we're doing. Because
One thing what I mentioned it was because you're seeing the samples of inorganic samples in the atmosphere, and Wall had mentioned how these form like little geodes, and one of my samples has like this peanut-shaped geode on it, and it's a raw rare mineral called a nalcene. So that's kind of what it was. I was interested. I wanted to kind of bring it out there because I had now the spectroscopy samples that maybe it could be interpreted, and maybe if you had maybe seen those wave patterns maybe detected, maybe it might help out or something. As was all I was thinking. Maybe Wall was inferring, because it kind of dawned on me now that that's kind of how it may have tied together. I'm not sure, but
I would say, well, we didn't. I don't recall us getting a sample from Bruce for analysis. I don't know.
It was just the X-ray diffraction charts that Mike Zielinski did in NASA, and
boy, I don't recall. You know what? I just don't.
I'll provide a link here later on. I'll get that pulled back up.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, getting back to the frequencies and vibration that were mentioned earlier, Centrox B early in the chat, and these questions came early from the chat when we first started. His question is, what frequencies are used in the electric current that's fed into Safire, and do you guys experiment with different frequencies?
The intent to test the electric universe is to use strictly DC. We do have a 300 millivolt. No, it's not even that. It's like 50 millivolt frequency at 360 hertz, I think, is what we're seeing. But the voltage ranges that we have up there and that we're running with, we don't see any right now. We're not aware of any responses that we're getting because of that. It's noise, you see, what you would consider noise electrically. But outside of that, the intent was to use DC power only. Now, that being said, now we're moving into the new mandate. So we also know, too, that we can introduce microwave, where we can put some sort of modulation in there to go and explore whether or not that will have an increase in these responses or dampen them. Who knows, right? So that is something that we will be exploring moving forward. It has been something that's been on the table for us to do, but the mandate was really to test the EU model. Does that answer?
Okay, very good. I'm sure it answers it for him. Jonathan A. Wills has a beautiful question. He says, I'm wondering if you'd be able to share more of your thoughts on all the beautiful shapes of the plasma that were created during the runs of Safire number 3.
My thoughts on them?
Yeah, on the beauty of them.
Oh, man. It's so hard to watch every day. Once you see the plasmas being formed, they're just beautiful. It's like it's a light show that you've never experienced before, and they're naturally occurring, and they change this behavior. The behavior is like the tufts. The tufts themselves are like quite a phenomenon.
Even better than staring into a fire?
I'd say it's close to that. Yes, I would say very similar. You can stare at a fire all night. You can do this all day. It's like that because they're colorful, they're beautiful, they change. I'm blown away. I would say that
it's almost alive.
Well, that's why Langmuir, I think it was Langmuir, coined the frame that's plasma, so it's lifelike. You see, and yes. What we're saying right now, and in the mainstream community, would like to tar and feather us for saying this, but what we're trying to do, the plasma double layer shells, when they form, they're self-organizing. We're not trying to push them. We're trying to feed the plasma what we think it would like. If that makes any sense. And that's what's going on. And
well, yeah, there's always a point, sort of like tuning a radio, or like when you're doing that the calculation of when you're trying to find what's going to pass through the bandwidth perfectly and give you the least amount of resistance. when you're doing those type of things between inductors and capacitors and so forth, and your tuning circuits and so on. That type of idea, I can understand what you're saying. In a plasma, you sort of have that field, and once you start getting a quote unquote feel for it with it in its own dynamics, the question, of course, becomes, I mean, things that obviously that might have changed with our sun in the recent past. What would happen if suddenly the entire chamber suddenly got 3 times larger or twice as small? All those reactions now have to occur on smaller areas and so forth. What would that look like? And you mentioned about the auroras or at least the plasma, and of course I saw the northern lights. I mean, you must have once or twice in your life, and it's that type of mystifying. One cannot not stare at them, like it's.
Yeah, I think what we're getting into here now is a conversation that I would have with people offline.
Well.
Okay, so
spirituality.
Well,
it's still beautiful.
Yeah.
Like when you get to this level here, and this is the first time I let it out in public, I could walk up to the chamber and ignite the plasma by just putting my hand and just interrupting what we think is the E field, and just moving my hand like this, and I could ignite the plasma. I could do it again and again. So what we're talking about here is that nobody knows right now what actually causes plasma to ignite. It's like Michael said, it's under tension.
You are a wizard.
Huh. Well,
sorry, that was a joke, but I understand what you mean about the fields. I mean,
right.
There's capacity fields.
You can get into things like this. Is like
we interfere with radios all the time by waving our hands around.
So if you cause that plasma to be perturbed by speaking to it, it will ignite.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so that goes into a whole other area that Jean Rake, who's a director of CERN, is getting into on his personal side. Okay, so we have to separate. The science that we're doing is pragmatic and it's science, but it doesn't deny some of the things that guys like Rupert Sheldrake, guys like Hal Puthoff, guys like James Ryder were involved in, and a number of things like Dean Radin examples, And
why did you put incense in churches? Why would
my mind is absolutely
on the inside.
My mind is orbiting the moon right now.
Sorry, that just suddenly just occurred to me. I was like, well, you're singing, and now anyway.
So we know that our voices right now generate electromagnetic fields as well. So when we get into this, what causes matter to organize? And it's pretty sensitive. It's pretty sensitive in Safire because it's a plasma. It's rarefied gas. It doesn't take a lot.
It transduces almost. Okay.
So once it organizes, it
like
just
a
wants
speaker,
to.
I mean.
It wants to get organized. It wants to go into equilibrium, and I think that what we're seeing in Safire is that it's wanting to stay in that equilibrium. That's and that's why it's so stable. We can run the thing for days. It doesn't. It's not like a flash in the pan,
I have no doubt that this was seen by people on the Earth. It must have been. We have Nazca lines that look like giant spiders, and the only thing that would look like a giant spider is to see the shells of, say, Jupiter in the sky or something, and you'd be like, well, yeah, you'd see a spider-like thing with long legs going off into the distance. And I freak out at that just thinking about what that, because that would only, it would only have existed for a period of time. It would be gone because this plasma would change its dynamics again. Because it's a semi-stable thing.
Well, we know that the plasma.
But the stories they
polar configuration changed into many different shapes and forms.
Stairway to heaven, all that stuff.
So you get
to the next question. Sorry, go ahead, Monty.
No, I was going to say maybe we can move on to one of the other guest questions.
Yeah, the next question comes from Michael Wise. Do you find that there's more even-numbered elements transmuting, which would be the same principle that they find in matter on Earth? I don't know if that's true, but
say what's the question again?
Do you find that there is more even-numbered elements transmutating in the chamber, which would be the same principle that they find in matter on the Earth? I don't know.
That's a great question.
Well, we got some great guests in the live chat.
That is something. I don't know right now. We never even counted them. You know what you could do is you could go back to the video that we gave at the University of Bath. We showed you the elements it's creating, and just freeze the video and take a look at them. I don't know if I have them even handy here. I might even have them.
I think I have it. Right. Like here's the project 2019 update.
Mm.
What part? If this is it.
Give me a second.
It's where it lists the elements, Neil.
Well, just bear with me. I might have I've got my presentation here right here in front of me.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Throw it up if you want. I think I have a picture of that little green sphere that you created. You can share your screen if you want to put whatever.
I was just wondering with that. Okay, what I'll do here is I will.
There's a little button right beside the down in the lower.
Oh, I see it. Okay, just give me a second.
No problem.
Can you guys see this?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay. Just bear with me here. We're running. I'm just scrolling through. See, these are some of the elements here that we picked up on the ball. Here's the elements here that we picked up, but I'll just go down through here. Give me a second here. Here we are. We're going further with Michael's because see, remember I was telling you about the elements that were being created within the atmosphere? That's what the signature looks like. And as you get into it, it's actually giving off, if you transpose this or work with this, it actually looks like it's continuous spectrum as well, by the way. But these are all the other elements that we see in here. We just don't know. These are in the atmosphere. Give me a second here. I'll go right down to the last table. Here we are. Okay. So we have sodium. That's odd, but we've got 19, 20, 22, 25, 30, 50. Doesn't look like they're even, all of them. So I don't know if you guys would.
Duffy here. Michael Wise had additional questions, which I think are pretty interesting. He also asked, Stan Dio modeled the Earth and the solar.
Stan Dio. I know the name. Oh, okay.
Sapphire setup differ from the Primer Fields video setup, and will they try another EXP setups?
I'm sorry. What was the question again?
Well, he's got 4 questions, and I pulled them because I thought they might be related. The first one he asks is the Stan Dio modeled the Earth and solar orbits based off of the water vibration waves. I think we kind of covered that. He also asks, how does Sapphire setup differ from the Primer Fields videos setup? And do they try another EXP experiment setups? What would the perfect experimentation for a transmuting only setup? Boron slows neutron capture by 100 times. Boron increases neutron capture by 100% or times supposedly, which would be part of the transmutation.
Isn't that in the movie The Mask with the shadow?
It's over my head, but I thought.
Okay, so so here's the deal. This is something that we are we're in communication with some of the people of the ECAT world who are involved with Leonard, and some of the things that we want to do moving forward is to identify whether or not we do in fact have maybe short-lived or slower fast neutrons, and whether or not we need to use boron or not. We don't know right now. If that answers that question, I'm not sure if it does. If I understand correctly. So does that answer your question?
Well, you seem to say that it doesn't seem to make even numbered elements in the same way that we find them here on Earth. So yeah, I would say that answers the question. Brian, go ahead.
Sorry, because the one thing that they asked was about the primer fields, and I'm not sure that Monty knows about the primer fields
work. I don't know if he's familiar.
But for me, the difference is massive. So the primer fields is just all based on magnets and plasma in the chamber, which is very different to what the Safire actually does, where you've got
Okay. So this goes.
Rigorously.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would be this like relating to things like what LaPointe's work is? Do you know LaPointe?
That's actually
Yeah.
who we're referring to.
Oh, okay.
The Primer
Yes.
fields, David LaPointe. Yeah.
Right. I'm familiar with his work.
He
So
used
now,
the magnetic balls to sort of simulate that hourglass shape and therefore see
To
the
make a
effects,
pinch.
which
Yes.
Yeah,
which is a
No.
nifty idea.
no, I know it's a nifty idea, but no. What's happening in Sapphire is what we see is that the plasma under these conditions is creating its own pinch. You
Yes.
don't need a magnetic field.
Wow.
No, you don't need it. That's why we say we can't find disparities with the model that Don Scott is articulated with the Birkeland currents, because it will create a pinch, and that's what we're seeing with Sapphire. When I was saying it was sequestering, it's bringing elements into the core. It's much more dense around the anode than it is anywhere else in the chamber. So it's acting like a Z pinch.
I see what you're saying. And in
Wow.
addition, there's a tendency to, of course, like if transmutation is occurring, apparently iron is something that will eventually become like one of the last endothermic or exothermic reactions. I can't exactly remember which one. In the nuclear terms.
Yeah, it's right in the middle. It's in the middle. So one way it's exothermic, and the other is endothermic.
So as soon as you actually end up at that point, you're going to have a lot of extra magnetic field strength, because it will iron will condense magnetic fields. It doesn't necessarily just by its presence, which would focus more energy on the star eventually. Those stars would probably get brighter over time. We had this talk with Edwin, so I'm just helping people sort of say where this might go.
Nice.
Well, that is interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because these Okay, so carry on.
Next question. Brian Wells asks,
How am I doing
can
so-
Monty
No, he didn't answer his question. Let him go.
Sorry.
sorry.
No, I was just saying, am I crashing and burning, or am I? It was my nose just above the water level right now.
Oh my God, you're doing fine. We have more people than we've ever had in our entire lives on this show. So please continue.
Okay, that's great. No, you guys have got a timeline, and so I really like to hear what your audience, the questions are, and see if I can have a go at them.
Well, as long as that one's answered, yes, go on to the next one.
Okay. Brian Wills asks, can Monty explain the cascade effect that goes on to create the reaction from the initial charge reaction to particles to transmutations? Is it all electrical?
We would say at this time right now, I would say if you look at, let me just scroll back here if he's looking. Okay, so where does he zoom in here? Does he zoom in any of these? No, but it doesn't matter. Okay, oh yeah, it does here. Okay, so here's an example. We see that it doesn't tell you what the relative intensities are of these lines here for manganese. Okay, so here's an example. These lines here, from what I know right now, follow what's called normal distribution, which is based on the thermal excitation of these elements. We've also seen these lines reverse, which means that it's a non-thermal response of the element itself. So in other words, the element is responding based on a non-thermal excitation, meaning you're not using kinetic energy to create it. Okay, so we think that that's electrical. It doesn't mean that the chamber won't respond thermally. It just means this element that's in here right now on these lines here, I think this is a standard thermal distribution.
Or
So
vibrational?
Vibrational, if we're saying non-thermal, we do see behavior right now where we see both. So we see thermal, which is you see here, and non-thermal, which the lines will reverse sometimes, which means that they're being excited not because of being thermally heated, as an example. Does that answer your question?
I also heard that sometimes they widen in the presence of magnetic fields.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we are seeing line broadening. Yep. We can't say whether it's Stark
I'm not
or
sure
Zeeman.
it's called the Zeeman effect or something. I'm not sure.
Well, we have evidence of that line broadening. Now, Paul talked about that, where we have higher energies further out than we have internally. We don't know the effect. We just have work to do on it, but we're aware of these things.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that does sound like you answered that question.
Hey, well, at least you're looking. I mean, that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, we could spend 4 hours on some of this. I mean, Michael and I, it took us 3 weeks just working on this alone to get this resolved. Like, it's complicated stuff, and it's
No doubt.
well, before you start presenting it, we need to be pretty confident that we've got this worked out, because we don't want to be leading people astray or asking, going off in a direction that because we haven't provided good solid work, if that makes any sense.
If you don't have all your ducks in a row, people will just point at you and laugh.
Well, it's also easy for people with nothing to lose over here, looking at this from the outside, to incorporate that into their own pet theories. But at the end of the day, and I include myself in this. So what I mean is that Monty must be above and beyond that. He must be, as someone who is not taking any chances and making sure, no, we're going to test that theory. We're going to test it, and we're going to go point by point. Right. We can change the voltage. We can see if that is going to work in this situation.
Right. So we don't. That's why we don't.
And we'll do it 100 times first.
Right.
Well, that's what we said. Like with the electric universe, that we think we're able to put our name behind it to say that we think that the primal force is, if not the primal force in nature, is at least a force that needs to be reckoned with in that context. In the sense that we think it's the electrical force in nature is the primal force now. I would say that's what the evidence shows.
And a valid model for,
I would agree,
stars, basically.
Yeah, it looks like to us, because we're getting a Z pinching around the anode. We're seeing the elements being coalesced and brought into the core. We know for sure. We see segregation of elements within the atmosphere, whatever that's all about. And
you see the anomalies with I guess what in the Thunderbolts of the Gods project it was called, in the section called helioseismology, Donald Scott reviews a bunch of I guess it was 11 or so factors that seem to be something that this model apparently answers. I'm not sure if you answered all of them.
Yes, a lot of them. I mean, some we can't.
Some of them you can't because it's so small, right? I mean, and happening infinitely faster than it would be,
Yeah, like the current model says that, okay, the heavy elements you see in the atmosphere are leftovers from supernova from bygone days or whatever. And what the electric universe says is that these elements should be able to be created within the atmosphere or proximity of the sun. That's what we're seeing. So we would say, boy, you guys made the claim, we tested it, and here's the test results. See? So it looks like our sun makes elements. And where's it making them? Well, probably within the photosphere, as they claim, and because that's what we're seeing here with Safire.
Well, that's where all the energy is, 12 million degrees worth.
Yeah, well, we get into temperature, that's a whole nother bucket of nuts.
Yeah.
Because
it's still...
we want to avoid the topic of temperature, because none of the numbers, like how do you translate 1 electron volt to 11,600 Kelvin thermal temperature?
And temperature is not heat-bearing ability either. Like, it doesn't affect specific gravity or anything. So
right. So there's so many things about temperature that it can get this whole conversation way, way, way off topic. And
all right. Well, we'll stay off of that then.
To say the thermosphere could be 1,500 degrees, but if it's in space, what is 1,500 degrees?
We could just move on to the next question.
Oh yeah, that's perfect. That's
Sonoluminescence is a question.
Oh,
could I just one moment?
Sonoluminescence.
Well, let me. Duff,
does anybody know?
Can you hold that?
William Armand Sosa had a question, so go ahead.
Yeah, Silent Murmur, and this is the last question that I can picked out of the audience. Duff, you have some more, so the floor will be yours after this. Could findings indicate the reactor walls approach their capacitance threshold? And that's from Silent Murmur.
Capacitance in what way? Like electrical capacitance or thermal?
I'm not sure.
I think it would be electric.
Is it thermal or electric? If you can quickly type that in.
Okay, so let's just go and take a look at a picture here. Where is it?
A 20-second delay, by the way.
Okay, one moment.
Don't worry about it. We'll be fine.
I will show you something here.
These people get to ask in real time. I'm sure they're going to be okay.
Okay. You see this picture?
Yep.
Okay. So we get a bit of a glow discharge here against one of the cathodes, but nothing over here. So at certain times, what we see is that the anode does not need a cathode, per se, like a physical cathode.
And he just replied thermal.
Well, since you're using DC, it sort of has to be.
Okay, so here we are. when we ran the experiment, where are we here? Okay, so here it is here. So we followed the experiment. This is the amount of. It's actually the yellow line here. Okay, so it peaked up here when the anode started to melt. The chamber itself had reached its maximum temperature. That meant that the internal temperature of the chamber was about 500 degrees Celsius. The reason why we picked that number is because, well, we just start melting gaskets, okay?
Right.
So it shouldn't have reached that temperature. It only required 7% of the energy going in to accomplish that. So the question is, can it exceed the chamber wall? And the answer is yes, because as you can see here, it never did go into what's called a steady state. We had to shut it down. Now, the thing is, we do have control over that, but we don't need to put this much energy in to get this here. So we could bring it back down where it goes into a steady state, so maybe it doesn't melt the chamber. We have control over that.
We should also point out that the star has no such ability. It will melt, and it will just be a ball or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm just saying. Like, you can't turn off the power like you can do. You don't worry about that. The star has no limit. It has limitations of, I don't know, physical properties of materials, whatever they might be at those voltages.
Yeah, I would say if the voltage delta between the sun and its environment changes, you'd see a significant change in our star's behavior.
Well, or if we entered an area which had increased charge, then the heliopause would react by shrinking.
I would agree with that, because that's what I was showing you here.
I want to give myself a high five right now because Monty agreed with me.
And inside that heliosphere, the energy contained in that heliosphere would make everything more energized.
Well, yes. It would be acting more and more. Yeah. It would be acting.
So that's what we see here. Like if I run this is a video here. I'll just run this. I don't know if you see this.
We can see it. No problem. Everyone can see it.
Okay,
I love the dance.
So this is a whole day's worth of experiments here.
Oh.
So we're changing a number of parameters.
Oh, so we're watching this like going really, really fast?
Yes.
So this actually was sustained for hours.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. And then this happened.
Right. So what you see here is we changed certain parameters in here where basically the double layers will collapse. But as you can see here now, if you see just before this, well, just notice this before. I don't know if I can get back this frame. Like there's no cathode glow discharge here. So the actual charge plasma is staying alive because the voltage delta between the anode and the environment is such that the environment is providing all the electrons. It does come ultimately from all its surrounding, but like a Tesla coil uses the atmosphere to get the electron flow. It doesn't have, like, say, a metal cathode.
Right. So I get that. I get that. Sort of like the heliopause are virtual cathodes.
Right.
In a sense.
Where do the electrons come from?
It's not electrically static, guys. It's not static.
Can I segue into a?
I love that question. That's a question that that question was the one that when Crookes did his experiment back in the 1800s is the one that sold me on doing this work.
Because guys, look at it.
He put rubies in a plasma discharge, and the rubies were not part of the circuit, but the rubies started to give off radiant matter, which meant that the rubies themselves would not climb or fall to the electrical potential around it, and that's when you have a discharge. So when you end up with a culmination of protons, like let's say our star, it's going to be positively charged relative to the environment that's around it, and that will cause electrical.
Because it has a surface.
Well,
I mean, there's
maybe
nothing else to give surface. I mean, these would be like, if you think about like little balls, as Tesla might say, little balls of metal in a sea of plasma or whatever, a sea of electricity or a sea of magnetism, whatever you use for a term there. But it's not improper to think of it that way. I mean, the charges are moving and they're going to continue on moving wherever they're going, but now this is now a load in a circuit that's doing its expression schemes. And
yes. So you're going to have a flow of electrons and and ions going back and forth, and it's not going to come into equilibrium. So the sun, you might say, is if it went into equilibrium in that context, there wouldn't be a star, just be a ball. So the plasma is trying to come into equilibrium. That's why you have this discharge, and you have flow between the two. In any case, we can talk about that. But before that, where are we here?
Oh, I love those layers, cloud layers, whatever we want to call them.
So you can see there's no discharge here around on the cathodes.
The great Queen Spire.
I can see it here.
Metaphysics shielding, if you can put that around a ship.
Okay, no.
Yeah. We talked about.
We cannot reveal this information to the Cardassians. Shush.
And here's the one that we changed. This is where we changed the chemistry in the gas. It just cooled down. Yeah. Okay. So does that answer your question? Because I'm sure you've got other listeners who've got lots of questions, and I don't want to.
Please.
Duffy has the floor now with the questions. More questions from the audience. Go ahead, Duff. And thank you.
Sure. Oh, and thank you. So William Armand Sosa had a question regarding sonoluminescence. How does the electric sun model factor? How does it factor in? Does sonoluminescence have a place in the model?
I'm trying to get my head around what he means by luminescence and the cost.
Well,
why does the sun shine, you mean?
No. Sonoluminescence is the principle where basically a collapsing bubble will give off light. And no one knows exactly why. And, there's arguments that it could be because it's collapsing and then the electrons are now accelerating as it's spiraling in on itself or something like that. Not sure.
I don't think I can answer the question. Michael might be able to be in a better place to answer that question.
Or Gareth might know more about it. I don't want to be. I want to give it the validity of merit because there is a sort of like a. I mean, it's not wrong to think of this sort of thing as a surface tension, because it literally is a tension of voltage on a surface.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to bring up another presentation. Give me a second.
So while you do that, I would say I think that even if it is occurring, you wouldn't be able to differentiate it from the fact that the plasma itself is in glow mode. So I don't think there's any way of knowing that at this stage. I can't see why it would be happening.
I just put up a photo in the chat about Farnsworth biography. And the spherical multipacitor tube that he created, which kind of looked like it created a galaxy inside the tube. Do you know about that?
I don't.
I'll review that. I'll review that later. Let's go with what's going on here, though.
Okay, so this is dark mode plasma in the sense that the plasma itself is under tension. And we bring the probe in, as you can see right now, the space between here and here. You're basically looking at zero or ground, okay, zero.
Right.
We run and think of this as a cross section through the plasma. So this is a sphere. Okay, it's a sphere.
Right.
And what we're doing right now is we're measuring it, and this is not ignited. This is what you see. There's nothing there. This is a field, and this field strength here right now is this one here. I think it's almost 1,000 volts. So if you bring the probe in at zero, and it just jumps to 1,000 volts and climbs up until we actually hit the anode. That's in the plasma. You would not want to walk into this. You wouldn't see it, but you would get fried. So that's the field you're talking about right now, I think. This is after it's ignited. This is its form. Now, this is kind of flattened out, but you flatten it out so it looks like this, but this is the actual signature of this plasma. So as you come into it, you can see where it drops down, where we have trapping of electrons and ions right in this region here. And then we climb up towards the anode, and then it drops back down again. I'll try and see if I can make this bigger.
Not unlike the Van Allen belts, so to speak.
Right. So, and this is things that Michael will talk about.
Oh yes, that's who immediately in my head. That's who just popped in. His presentation was drawn by his own hand with his pencil.
So this is a field. I mean, I call it a force field. Don't put that on record, okay?
It's okay.
Michael will school me on that.
But it is a field. It's a voltage field. It's a tension field. Or
yeah,
whatever.
it's exactly. So that's what it's doing. It's doing this on its own. And then when this forms here, this is the structure that it wants to form, and it's staying in this state. I mean, you might see variations in here, as time goes on, but it's basically, this is the electrical shape of the plasma there. Now, that's just with one double layer. If you go into multiple double layers, this is why the 2019 update and Bath was good. Where are we
yes.
here? Okay, I'm not showing it in that video presentation. But in here, you'll see multiple dips as you go through it until you get to here. And then you'll see a serious and very high voltage drop just off the surface of the anode. And it'll go to 0 in some cases. And that the physical depth of that's maybe 0.03 millimeters. It's not very, very thick. So.
But
okay.
these are, and of course, this is a semi-stable thing that will stay there until conditions are such that it will collapse.
Yeah, we can change it so that we can keep it here however long you want.
Oh, really? Oh, so you're at that point.
Oh yeah.
I don't mean to sound surprised because it is not unlike basically, like controlling fire. Actually, no, it is not unlike. It is literally controlling fire. So it's very it doesn't respond naturally. It's almost like playing with gyroscopes made of gas. That's
okay.
how awkward it would be, like to try to control it, but you're getting a handle on it. So
we have a handle on it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's very impressive.
So we say that Safire is stable. We mean like it's stable. So I mean, we can introduce an environment where it goes and it's not stable.
Right.
Okay. But we know what it takes to make this happen and what it would like. It's like it wants to go into equilibrium, but what you're seeing here is its best ability. Well, I'm talking about like it's a living thing. Its ability to be able to maintain its stability. Now, what's interesting for those of you into optic spectroscopy, just notice that the color changes.
Yes.
You end up with different energy states and elements.
Oh, different elements too.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier, that it segregates the elements.
See, now that's very interesting. So the first thing that pops into my mind when I begin to see this sort of staircase going downwards is that each layer is an expression of the same amount of power as the layer below it, almost, except for the very first one, but on a smaller surface layer. If you know what I mean. So it's keeping with its sort of like being in series. You know what I mean? Could be. We are looking. Well, obviously, I had to do the calculations, but you get my meaning.
Neil, you do mention that a ball is the best way to disperse charge, right? So these double layers are all in a ball form,
yes,
and they're larger and larger and larger, and that's probably the reason why the charge is similar.
Well, I was just brought back to the sun
right?
and the heliopause. Sort of the idea. I know that layer is much further away than the surface or the layer that's near the corona and stuff. But we have obviously a very large dark space between us and the activity going out at the cathode at the heliopause. So we're literally just sent our first probe into it, and that was launched in 1973, guys. So let's just chill.
So this here would be maybe analogous to the heliopause in that context. Now, keep in mind that when you're looking, if you're in a plasma, like if you're looking directly at a plasma, it's translucent, so you can see right here. okay, to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you get really dense, like some of the pictures that we've shown, like this guy, you cannot see the surface now. But in this context, you can see the surface. So what I'm saying, in effect, is this is a elongated ball. Actually, it's similar to what the IBEX was showing, and not the.
It wouldn't. I mean, in 0G, it wouldn't look like this. The heat is causing it to rise slightly. Is that what's going on there?
No. Because if that was the case, you'd see that in.
Well, I can't actually tell the angle, so I didn't know if you had a different angle from
the
a different
environment
camera.
is temperature controlled, isn't it?
Sorry, what?
Your environment is temperature controlled, is it not?
Well, the outside of the chamber is. We can control, in some of our designs of the anodes, we can control the internal temperature for other types of experiments. But the outside of the chamber is cooled. Like we have fairly elaborate cooling systems.
Can I submit that the shape of what's going on around the anode isn't affected by gravity because the electrical forces are way stronger than the gravity?
No. Air pressure was what my heat rises is what I was thinking. That's all.
Oh, gotcha.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. Like we have in the chamber. Right now, we're showing the top of the chamber, okay, where we hit the 113 degrees. But there are times when we actually see an inversion in the sense that there's another area of the chamber which would be hotter than the top. So we do get. Normally, I would say that you get normal thermal buoyancy type of effect in the chamber, but not always.
Okay.
So
it was just an assumption that I made, and obviously it was good to be wrong because now I learned something.
Well. Yeah.
Well, that's what you're doing. I mean, you're right in explaining that because that's what happens. And
if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, I assume, and you were like, no, and I was like, oh, and that's good because like, oh, okay, well,
we make the same assumptions, right? We would expect to see that the top of the chamber would be hotter.
Of course, that's exactly what we just described. I mean, that's why it's anomalous for it to be onto one side, which is weird.
Right, and sometimes on the bottom. We've seen the bottom of the chamber hotter than the top.
Okay, that seems to violate a whole whack of things.
It does, doesn't it? So,
but I can potentially see a reason because of the electric field and so on. But I'm not. I'd have to look more.
Well, we think what it might have to do with is like the physical position of the anode relative to the center of the chamber. Okay, so if it's, like, say, further back, there could be more ions hitting the side of the chamber at the bottom because it's getting some sort of electron, the charge is actually going towards the side of the chamber that maybe we can't see. We don't know. Of
course.
So we're trying to maintain equilibrium, like make sure that the anode is actually right physically in the center of the chamber, so we get a nice.
Even spread, but it's not unlike the tokamak reactor where they were trying to make an electric shield or magnetic shield, and it would always sort of like jump and touch the side, no matter what they ever tried.
Well, exactly, and that's going to happen. It's going to happen unless that's what we're saying. The Safire is beyond those things because it creates its own field. We don't have to try to trap it. If you take a magnet and put it in here, it will disrupt that field.
Oh yeah,
and it doesn't even matter really how small it is. It can be a very tiny magnet. So it's sensitive that way.
Well, your hand does it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, exactly. Wish we'd got that on video.
Radio waves would probably do it too. Bet you.
Oh, they do because people use microwaves. They use all kinds of things to excite plasmas.
Well, your voice. He said his voice did it too.
I was going to say you'd be sitting there like, no, film the chamber. All right, hit a high C. Can you do that? Like, oh, look at this one. He's made a star. Like. And I actually made that wasn't a pun. I was actually thinking of like a physical star, not a.
What if we brought a choir in and sang to it, Monty?
There you go.
You know what?
That's crazy.
At this stage of my life right now, and what we're working on with Safire, what I've seen happen in there, I would say, yeah, give it a shot and see what happens because the field itself could cause certain resonances. Nobody knows right now. Keep this in mind.
Yeah.
What actually causes the ignition point. Like, why does it want to ignite?
Well, and that goes back to the sonoluminescence thing. Not that there's. By the way, the YouTube chat is like basically ready to elect you king. I mean, these people are just blown away. Some people are just communicating with emojis like hearts and explode. I mean, people are really, really blown away by this. And I think the thing is that it's the confluence of these different traditions and sciences and perspectives that are, sonoluminescence is a complete thing that hasn't even been sort of compared in your worldview. It's like that's somebody else's work for the next 50 years or 100 years. But the confluence, the crossing over of divergent sciences, water science, air science, electrical science, plasma science, ecology, energy, all of these different sciences, religion, the origin of the universe are converging in this one, idea, in this one concept. And I just think it's a testament to applied sciences and the power of applied sciences and the necessity of the applied science in relationship to theory and how important those relationships are. That's what's fascinating to me.
Well, we do too. We're at a point now where we think that nature doesn't segregate the sciences. Nature is nature, and they are all connected. And what we've done is, like over the last maybe 60 years is stovepiped many of the sciences, which I think is wrong. And where physicists say, well, we're the king, but they can't answer for transmutation. And where at one time with the sciences, we're all connected. So I think I think
it comes back to predictive accuracy. I mean, there's a reason why astronomers are always surprised.
Yeah, and there's a problem with that.
An engineer who's constantly surprised is going to drop buildings.
Yeah. My world in engineering, because that's my strength, is I better be darn close to my predictions, and then I validate it. Oh, gee, like I say to people, I was accused of being a perfectionist once, and I said, well, look, if I'm designing a new braking system for your car, do you want it to work most of the time? You see, no, you want it to work all the time, and even if they're squealing at you, they need to be working to some degree. So my world, you couldn't get away and get paid unless you can make some reasonably accurate predictions. So anyway, I'm not saying I have contempt for those who do it. I understand why they do this. But I think the bigger thing is that sciences have been stovepiped into various disciplines, which in fact, the world around us, the universe, isn't like that. It is all connected. And I think where we are now with Safire, as an example, is it's become quite evident that we have to bring these disciplines together and to work together and collaborate open-mindedly. I don't mean stupidly, okay, but open-mindedly to resolve some of these complex things, or I don't think we're going to move ahead very well.
And perhaps maybe walk across the hallway and talk to those engineers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
or biochemists, or
we're all noticing things, and that's the beautiful thing about the internet, is allowing this stuff to come together a lot faster than it did in just a few years ago.
Yes, exactly. And we were concerned about that. We thought, well, maybe this will get buried. And then we thought, well, with the changes that are going on in the world and the internet and the ease to get things out, we can just sidestep the standard procedures. We've been through the whole thing. We've got papers published. That was
we have papers beyond papers, but you're never going to get. No, they don't care. It doesn't matter. No. It's money, and it's ingrained.
So what we've decided officially is that we're not going to go after that road anymore. We're just going to carry on and do the good science that we do, and allow people to criticize us. Bring it on. If you think we're screwing up someplace, please let us know. We don't want to screw up.
Definitely.
And if you see something we might be missing, please say something, and carry on with the science. And if
people like me will wildly speculate for you. Trust me.
And if I get an invite to Safire, can I bring my jobmate radio and play Dark Side of the Moon to Safire?
Bring your freaking camera.
Well, that too, but
anyway,
I was gonna tell you, you and Michael would probably get along just fine. He brings some. He brought some weird.
If that happens, you guys are only 17 hours away. I'll drive over. So, I'm in New Brunswick.
More questions.
We have another question. Yes, but I want to. You know what?
Neil, can I ask a question?
I guess that's exactly why I wanted to interrupt. Please go ahead.
Yeah, it's Matthew from, well, everyone is electric if we're doing this all professionally. Right.
That's what I was going to say. Just one second.
Yeah.
Hold the thought. William Almansosa, the gentleman who asked that question, also has a video on this channel, which you can find with his name. And he's the gentleman that had the, talks about the electric potential of basically ancient ancient Safire Project called the Nadera Lights and stuff like that, and he shows you how to build it, how they used they showed they basically in their diagrams, and he built it himself. He built these things using the principles of like using electrical engineering. He's an electrical engineer, and he just read what they were doing on the wall just as if it was like a kid's instruction manual, and showed you how it was done. And it doesn't take even math. It just required, like take a nail and wrap a wire around it, and that type of stuff. And I was blown away, and so I just wanted to make sure that people knew that, because although the question wasn't conducive, it led to a lot of interesting things. But when you mentioned about what this means, or what when you're affecting the field, and we were talking about that sort of thing, I wanted to bring that up, because of how it was related and how one thing can lead to another, even though they seem unrelated at the time. So,
electricity.
Now go ahead.
Electricity binds everything. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. Yeah, it's just about Safire, and if it's transferable to sort of like very, very rapid geology transformations and fossilizations. Basically, salt water has turned into calcium. And I'm just wondering if that, if it's applicable to that, but also amber forming around foreign bodies. Could the transformation of air form around a foreign body, and that's why it can form around delicate creatures, and such as like dinosaurs also being transformed, in the open air? Can just elements be transformed in situ? Boom.
Like boom, you're a rock.
Boom, boom around, like, because amber's always found around creatures that don't struggle, and
a pillar of salt.
It drips on them. Does it form around it because it's a foreign body, because it has resistance or something like that?
Well, what we know is that if there's a charge delta, there's a lot of elements that will sheath. Okay, in other words, plasma sheathing, which is what you see forming around. I'm going to say this. Around the anode. That's what we call plasma sheathing. But it'll happen around a lot of different elements. It doesn't matter necessarily. It doesn't have to be a metal. Okay. Oh, right. I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, it does. So it's sort of like layers around geodes and things like that as well. That sort of something like that.
Yeah, I think it's quite possible. I mean, it's speculating, but I think from what I can see, that I don't think that the question is at all outrageous.
Okay, thank you. You've saved about 10 years of stress and strain. I've never had an answer to that question. Thanks ever so much, Monty.
Well, actually, just wanted to point out, and I think I told you this, but you might have forgotten, I actually have a first-hand account of that incident occurring, where lightning has hit a tree, blew it in half, and in the middle of that tree was found a stone that still looked like the tree. It was fossilized instantly, and I have that rock. So it is a first-hand account stretch. He actually had to break it from the tree. It was still attached to the tree as a rock.
Wow.
And there is the story of the electrical power line falling down on tree stumps in northern Quebec, I think it is, and Alberta. Creating stone. Alberta? Okay.
Yeah, I got
Alberta.
I'll get the. Well, anyway. You can find them
creating
online,
stone out of turning the tree stumps into stone.
See, I have no issue with it. When I take a look at where we live in Ontario and go north, and I see the heavier, softer elements running through the granite and through the there's another name for the other stuff that's been apparently not around as long. The granite's older, I guess. And they say, well, these formed here, and it took millions of years, and they were, a lot of temperature, a lot of like really high temperatures. I'm thinking some of these elements should have just evaporated, but they're just running through in these large veins because they're so soft and melting temperature so low. So for me, myself,
and what's causing those cracks to seem to be not even in the same plane as the stuff that's laid down. Like I know the question becomes evident just by looking at it. I mean,
yeah, and I look at that myself. This is my opinion. I'm not a geologist. but I look at that and I say, well, if it was just thermal, those elements really shouldn't be there. They should have evaporated.
Or there should be pools and pockets and blobs.
Yeah, that would make sense. That would make more sense. Yes, exactly. So I look at that and I think, so I don't deny what they're saying, but I'm not like, okay, that's interesting. Would be my perspective. Like the way I handle that, I don't write them off, but on the other hand, I have some questions about that. And
it's good to have questions.
Yes,
definitely. Like, what about cold plasma? Have you looked into, does Safire make cold plasma?
Well, isn't everything?
So when you say cold plasma, let's define what you mean in that context.
Well, I've seen some reports that the medical firms and medical companies are starting to create cold plasma devices that help heal.
Okay, I don't know. I wouldn't say our plasma's cold. Even this one here, which we don't get a thermal count on, I wouldn't say would fit it within the definition of what you're saying. So I don't know.
But again, you're like literally this. If we're turning one way, we make it bigger and we turn it into an engine or into a device that can power or change or transmutate a bunch of things, or you line them all up to do it, or whatever you do with this device or this science. The same thing could also be shrunken down into to do something particular to help heal in a particular way, which is suddenly just dawned on me. You know what I mean? Like that's where we're at with this. This is such a breakthrough in my mind of the stuff you can just sort of spitball with and understand where this could lead.
Well, I think there's people that I know that are you might say colleagues that are investigating the human E field. It's been well demonstrated that everyone has an E field, and it's affected not only by like electrical energies but also by like literally vibrational energies, like Aline McCutcheon, who does tuning fork, and it does affect people. So
I just
we've had her on the show
posted
too.
an explanation of cold plasma and a web link if anybody's interested.
You guys can
James from Seattle. I have a few things.
And then back to questions from Duff. Matt. Did Matt get to finish his question? I don't know.
Jim Wenninger has been waiting.
And is Jim waiting? Oh my God. Okay, well we're gonna have to go through you.
Yeah,
okay.
Jim's waiting.
Quick as possible though.
Not so quick, but whatever. The sun in the jar that you produced, to my way of thinking, that you've actually produced the surface of the sun, so that the transmutation that is happening on the sun is happening in your thing. I'm not sure if you're aware that the idea of electricity being solid oxygen itself, which would make sense that if you applied a lot of arc into it, it would produce solid oxygen, and then that would transmute into other things. And I talked to Jen Silver about 14 years ago, and he asked me to do the tree, to do all how that works. But I was so busy doing other stuff, I had no chance to do that. The other thing is that this is by it's going by the Gauss law, so I would look for ratios of 106, and that would mean that different parameters of voltage and whatever, which is the universe is producing planets and all that kind of good stuff, that would produce different levels of and ratios of the elements in all the bodies. So it would be different. It would not be just the same no matter kind of voltage and parameters that you use. So I guess that's a prediction. He also said two things: to look at the flows, the biggest flows, and some of the tiniest flows, because he said the scientists are looking at the stability points, which is kind of looking for atoms and particles and stuff like that. It doesn't really work that way. And that the other thing is to use lots of little arcs, lot of short arcs, and then a few long double arcs. And if you could point the parameters to start producing platinum, that would be the best, because he says that that's in all of the planes of existence, and they give you the most information. Those are the things that I wanted to spit out before this thing. And thank you very much.
Okay.
Go ahead, Monty. Sorry.
No, because he was postulating some ideas as to what would happen, and I'm just accepting what he's saying, like that he's making predictions as to. I think what I understand was not a question; it was really more of a prediction as to what we might be able to expect to see. And he was pointing about small arcs.
That's something that I've noticed too, like an induced arc across the surface, like we notice like prominences on the sun. That wouldn't surprise me that might be a factor, because you get nested magnetic fields increase intensity of the voltage.
That's what we measured here. So those tufts themselves, this is why they would say it would be analogous to the photospheric tufting that you see, or granular structures.
Like around,
so
was it Io, the rain of, they call it an electron rain coming down around the Talvashar volcano around Io?
It could be. I don't know. I don't know about. I know I've heard.
Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's just a really cool animation. I'm sure you probably see.
What I'm saying here, in this here right now, if you measure across the top of these tufts here, it's a positive ion flow out from the top of them.
Okay.
Each one of these, and they're equally. This is not a great picture, but we have them. They're all equally displaced throughout around the surface. So they're trying to find, I guess, electromagnetic equilibrium.
Well, yeah, because each one would also represent like positive charges or whatever on a surface of a ball.
Yes, they do, and they do move around. But on the top of these balls here is definitely a positive charge, and between them it goes more negative.
Monty, just on that, so if this is modeling the sun and those are tufts that we see on the surfaces of the sun, do we see any structures that are similar to what we would see as sunspots?
Well, that's something that Paul Anderson talked about. So let's just run this for a second. So sunspots, as you can see right here, this is a darker area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we would think that would be more like a coronal hole, as an example.
Yeah.
Sunspots, we don't know. They form these dark regions.
The small little dots.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know, but we would say that just visually, they look like they might be. And Paul Anderson's brought this up a number of times. Like we know we get a nice uniform distribution of plasma around the surface here, but we don't here, as an example.
We could also we should also understand that the amount of time that a sphere this size represents compared to the surface of the sun. So time factors the same as distance. So you got to understand that a sunspot that could last a very long time would only last split seconds on this thing. So I'm just trying to give context. That's all.
Yeah, there's
I like that little poll.
Yes, exactly. See, so we don't know.
That assumes that time and space are exponential in tandem. That I don't know. Can we even assume that?
Yes, in a plasma they are.
Okay.
The effect is current is the same. So you have current per square centimeter or whatever, then you can have whatever. But anyway, let's not dwell. I'll tell you about later. Keep going, Monty, please.
Well, we're good. I'm here for you guys.
I love the tendrils. I've seen that. That's sort of like the labyrinth idea, where the whole face of it turned into something horrifying, like a bunch of spaghetti. The monster went nuts type of mythology. David Talbot stuff.
Okay. Well, we've seen behavior like that. So, it can go, stable. And I don't know if we end up with any discharges. Just let me run this for a second to see if we see anything that goes crazy here. No.
So we also still have Jim's question.
Yes, go ahead, guys. Question.
Yes, everyone go ahead until we get back to Duffy.
Yeah,
mine is actually. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Go ahead, Jim.
Mine's actually a good follow-up to what Gareth was talking about because of sunspots. What I was going to ask is if Monty thought it would be possible to, now that they can have these nice steady spherical nested double layers, if it would be possible to have a really short, intense discharge right through those double layers. Because I think that would give you the analogy to sunspots. Remember, we see sunspots where we have this, where we know current flows right through, focus current, like in solar arcades, flows right through the solar surface. So what I would suggest is if you could do that, if you could have these nice, stable, treat that as a steady state, if you can really maintain those for a long time, if you could get a quick blast of charge right through there, I would like to. I know that'd be hard to do and hard to capture. I'm just asking first if that's experimentally something you think would be possible, because there are predictions that it would give us like the equivalent of a spot,
Mm-hmm.
a sunspot. And Don's model explains why it should do that, because that discharge, that small discharge through the sun's surface itself has to have a radial electric field. So when it crosses through that double layer, you see the obvious result of that. And what also should happen, if you could focus that.
Is this field being interacted by the Earth's field? That just suddenly made me wonder. Sorry. Go ahead. Keep going, Jim. Ignore me.
Well, all these like plasma pinch shapes, we should also see in that case. Remember what the astronomical observations show, that pinches happen where a current flows through an even larger scale double layer. Like the local chimney pinches where it passes through the galaxy. The flame nebula pinch happens right where it passes through an interstellar cloud surface. So it would be the same.
Charge causes things to pinch up. Yeah.
Yeah, what you should get is where that discharge crosses through those double layers. You should even see a pinch right there, or stacked toroids. If you have nested double layers, that's how you could get those stacked toroids. Each toroid would be at the next double layer. But that's my prediction of what you'd see if you could do the experiment. I'm just wondering if that experiment is technically possible or not at that point.
I would say, if you look at this here right now, this discharge, if you can see, is more prominent right in this region here, from here to the cathode as an example, while you have a double layer that's around here. Now, I don't know if what you're saying is technically possible to actually accomplish, or if I'm even on the same page as what you're asking for.
Well, one of the common misconceptions is in electrical engineering, because of Star Trek and things like that, is that you could overcharge something, and unfortunately the current is strictly dependent on the resistance and inductance and so forth. You can't really overcharge unless you do like a avalanche breakdown type stuff.
I don't know right now.
I was just saying in general electrical engineering. Please keep going. I was just helping.
I would
maybe I wasn't.
Yeah, what you're looking here when we talk about overcharge, we break it down into current and voltage. You can. What we do predominantly is let the voltage float. We let the current. We restrict it or choke the current if it gets too hot, because that's really where you see a lot of the thermal responses. And I don't think I'm even answering his question right now.
Well, also those layers store energy, correct? Like
yes,
they're capacitive.
Yes. These layers do store energy.
That's what I think. Would it be possible to send an arc blast from the cathode into the anode? I think that's what Jim's getting at, right?
Yeah, I don't know how you would do that. We do get really intense what we call streamers.
Oh.
Okay. Oh yeah, for sure. I'm just looking to see if we saw any here on this, but I don't see any in this video.
Well, you'd also have, if you could imagine having several of these together, each one being a positive source, they're going to interact with each other, just like if you put magnets together, like. I'm just saying they would have to create fields too, because they would feel each other. They would know each other's there.
James here from Seattle. I think the question is like, there's the anode, or I mean the sphere in the middle, and its connection to the other thing, and then you need a third body to come in between those two to get the kind of reaction. I think they're. I think he's trying to...
Yes. We did an experiment back in 2013 where we did that, and we did it. Actually, we did it in 2013, and we did it again this year.
No one died.
No one died. No,
okay.
no.
Good.
And we did it again this year. We just tried to test it. So we had basically 2 power supplies. And we had the main power supply, as you can see here, it's running this. And then what we did is we brought a probe in and increased its voltage and current. We didn't have enough difference to make much of a difference. But yes, so we have done that in the past, and yes, we could do that. Okay. It was a material study and a discharge study to find out more of a cometary type of experiment to see if you have a different charged body entering into this environment, what would happen.
Right.
And so we do see perturbation in the plasma, and we do see discharge, and we have seen it, but we haven't really
both the spheres the same size?
No.
Okay. That was important to me, because one would have to be, like, by virtue of surface area, it would have a larger field, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So that is an experiment that we tried. We didn't try it very long because we had a lot of other work we had to get done by a certain deadline.
Of course.
So we did try it, and it will work. And some people said, well, you can't put 2 power supplies going into the same environment at the same time. Electrically, that's not a good idea. But in plasma,
you're right.
But in a plasma, you can do that. You can get away with a lot. And you could put another power supply putting in 1,000 volts into a separate body in that plasma, and you can do that with a plasma.
Please recommend.
Did you find any discharge between the two?
Yes. Sorry. Yes, we did have a discharge between them. So, and that's really all we just want to kind of find out, like, if this would happen, and the answer is yes, it would. Did we explore it further? And the answer is no, we didn't. We just know that it can. And so if we want to pick up that experiment, we have enough evidence to say, well, this is something we can explore, moving down the road.
This would also, of course, I mean, obviously the first thing that pops into my mind is 2 fields interacting. You could build a relaxation oscillator and sort of prove Don Scott's pulsar theory.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that he has in Electric Sky, he talks about the relaxation oscillation between 2 bodies in space, and that's how, in the electrical interaction of their fields, their plasma spheres, cause one to build up asynchronously, and therefore discharge unevenly, and there you get these pulses.
Yes, and the answer is yes to that. We've seen behavior like that in Safire, even under these conditions where the plasmas want to go into equilibrium and it breaks apart, and they can happen very fast. And then
it builds up again.
Yep.
So it's not unlike you would build, like I said, a relaxation oscillator. You just basically put a current and you get a like you get your vibration out of that.
Yep. Yeah.
James,
wow.
Am I hearing you right that you just said that 2 power supplies is only possible in a plasma, and then in other words, in a dead universe or dead gravity traction universe, it's impossible?
No. What I was saying is, if you have your house,
electrically unsafe.
Electrically unsafe. So you have power coming into your house, right? So let's say you have a generator, and you've got a switchgear there between the 2. You do not want the generator or any power coming from out in the street coming into the same
circuit.
Same circuit. Okay.
You want them magnetically isolated, at least.
Well, yeah. So in a plasma, on the other hand, you can do this. So you can introduce 2 or 3 different power supplies into this plasma.
In a way, you are magnetically and capacitively isolated because the plasma creates that in a way.
Yeah, it takes care of it itself. Yeah. So you don't have to worry about blowing up your power supplies.
So you're saying that if a comet or a body is charged, it's going in the universe.
That's why the universe doesn't neutralize instantly.
Yeah. The satellite, it can have its own power because it's a plasma.
Yeah, but you may get a discharge if it's like, say, if let's say your satellite's positively charged or negatively charged, more relative to the environment it's going into. Depending how long it takes to go into equilibrium in the environment around it, you could theoretically blow the spacecraft up. That's why they say, like, Walt Thornhill, he predicted, I think it was Temple 1, a large explosion before it would actually hit the asteroid.
Right.
It's because Temple 1 had a particular charge to it, and it was actually not going into equilibrium with the asteroid, and it blew up before it actually hit there. Same thing with, I think it was Schumacher comet.
Levy 9.
Right, exactly. So what you've got is a situation that if that body will not climb or fall to that potential that it's getting near, you're going to see sparks fly. That's what Crookes found out. Walt Thornhill predicted those things would happen, and they happened. So if you move a body in here that's got a different charge, you will see sheathing. You'll see.
Did he also predict that the ice drill would break? I don't know.
Oh, did he?
I don't know if he predicted that. I'm just wondering.
Oh, I don't know if he did that, but he did predict
it. Did break.
67P, I think, he predicted it would be a rock, and that's what they found, and they can't figure out why there's water. And
sorry,
it's magic.
H and
it's
O
magic.
combining. It's water. No, it's not. Stop this.
So, anymore?
We have some more here. Matt, did you get to finish your question at least? Let's go with you, and I don't know who else in this particular chat wanted to, and then we can get back to Duff, and then I think that we're done. So at least we'll try to get done the next like half an hour, hopefully.
I don't want
to go too long, but it's great. It's too good to pass up. That's all. Please go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. I got to finish my question, but I was just wondering about the geology implications of these sort of Safire and transmutations. Are there any main ones that Monty could tell us?
The landscape looked pretty good on that tungsten ball.
Yeah, well, I'll take you there.
Oh, it'll look like camouflage almost.
There it is.
I've got a better one here. Just a moment. No. Just bear with me.
That's quite all right. Don't worry.
Take your time.
Oh, there's some.
So what we were looking at here, this is the stuff that we found in between these nodules. Now, the original surface was...
It's the reason why we call it the Safire Project, because those are sapphires. No, sapphires are blue. Emeralds. Ah, darn.
Well, the reason why this is actually colors that are assigned to those elements. Just so, in EDAX, you assign a color. You can pick whatever color you wanted this to be. If you wanted the...
Oh, the computer's covering it. Yeah, okay, I got it.
If you wanted the carbon to look pink, you could make carbon be the pink color.
Gotcha.
Okay, so it's just to show you basically the elemental distribution of the elements, like in through these regions. So if you want to look at geology, it did not look like this before. This is after. And here's actually close up. Here, see? Ooh. So we're not telling you what some of the base elements are because that's part of our secret sauce, okay? That's part of the protection.
Of course.
Can you tell us what the holes are in the mesas?
That has got us. This material should not have done this.
And look at the little etchings at the top. It looks like I'm looking at the tops of Mars. Like,
well, to me, it looks like something exploded out of them.
Well, we see those on tops of monuments, don't we? And like in Egypt and stuff, these holes everywhere.
They look geologically reminiscent.
Anyway, there you go. There's some geologic for you there, Matt.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks ever so much. There you go. Anyone else up here? And sorry for interrupting, Robert.
I was just saying, if a classmate of mine just blew up a transistor in a lab experiment that left the same exact hole like that, where it had the rippling concentric into the more focused hole, almost exact hole like that.
Of course, proving the adage that every machine is a smoke machine if you work it bad enough.
Yeah, they wired it backwards, and we heard this little
I've done that.
Boom. Yep.
Pow.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Data sheets.
Oh yeah. Or you've wired your whole circuit wrong backwards and have to adapt the whole thing.
Are those spherules smaller than those holes?
Yeah, what's the scale we're looking at? We're talking picometers, micrometers. Okay.
What are we down here?
That's 5 micrometers. Yeah.
Yeah. 5 here, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It looks like. What I found interesting is the actual like tectonic formation in this surface of the sphere.
Well, yeah, it looks like it could be Titan or something. Like from space.
More an ice planet.
Whatever, like Europa. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm obviously just being poetic, but I mean,
Well, doesn't it look awfully similar to the plasma ball that created it?
Well, I'm just wondering if those holes in the top of those mesas are
in the ball
same
there.
size as the balls.
Yeah, that's a good question too.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
So in other words, would the balls fit in the holes? Basically, is what you're asking.
Would the balls have come out of the holes? Is what I'm leading at.
Right. But isn't it also notable that this ball that we're looking at is similar to the plasma tufts that we see when in the instrument itself?
I wouldn't say so. That's my opinion. This is cerium and lanthanum combined here. So we don't have cerium and lanthanum in the chamber. So it's making a cerium and lanthanum ball. And why they're like this, I don't know right now. Just give me a second here. I'm just going to move this away for a minute. I got to check something here.
Blows my mind.
Sorry?
No, it just blows my mind because of it. Some of the ideas of like how did something get split into multiple pieces and then recombined and crushed together, and that could explain how the Earth is what it looks like, because we see some sort of we see the Great Balls of Costa Rica. When you break them open, they sort of look like that, and they have that sort of pattern like those balls there do. But they're coated with something when they're on the ground later. Like they're coated with rock, but if you blast them open, you can see these triangular patterns all through them.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to do kind of an
like
ion cross-sectional type of on these. I don't know if they're hollow or if they're solid or what's inside. It would be interesting to find out.
Well, yeah. That's a whole other ball game, though.
But do they fit in the holes?
Marble.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like a whole different material inside them.
Oh, don't even. You could break them open. There could be gold inside. We don't know.
Somebody asked me that. My funder actually said,
"I'm rooting for peanut butter."
He said to me, "You're making everything else. How come you're not making gold?" So
you should say gold's the easy part. You want to do something tough, right?
Ah, there you go.
No, that's when you say, "I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you."
Oh yeah. Or yeah. Slow down
James,
there. Slow down there, Glenda Got Rocks.
James, I would be really fascinated if we could get a list of the problems that or the mysteries on a regular basis for our group, so that we could just go brainstorm and run.
Okay, here's one. Okay, I'm going to throw one out at you guys.
Sure.
Okay. All I'm going to tell you is that this is quartz. Okay. This is before. So you can see the surface, beautiful, nice, shiny. This is during.
Mm-hmm.
This is after.
Camouflage.
The quartz itself is not thermally stressed.
Good sphere.
Okay, let me go down here. The thermal.
It looks like it has rays. Does it look like it has rays on it? I'm sorry. I was just looking at the picture. I saw the green striations look kind of like rays. See?
No, they're
So the thermal. Go ahead.
So the issue here is this. Thermally, we know right now that the temperature, the report back from the IR camera at the time, says that this material should not have melted, but it did. But the temperature should have melted the quartz, but it didn't.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh. So when you talk about an hour, somebody's talking to me about thermal and non-thermal responses. So we're getting erosion and these changes where these things look like they're melted, and we know that the thermal energy should not have done that to that material, nor should it have actually done what it did.
The surface lost electrical cohesiveness, not thermal cohesiveness, type of thing.
Right, and that's why we're calling it electronuclear resonance, because we don't think that we think that the binding energies of these elements is being broken apart. We're getting a exothermic reaction, but it's not because it's kinetic. And that's also what. Go ahead, please.
I apologize for interrupting, but immediately the first thing that pops into my head is that the thing that we've been harping about before is that somehow it seems that way back when, in the ancient days, that we see them cut into rocks that we don't. If you use steel to do this, it would be impossibly thin steel. It would have at 2 meters in size. How did they cut this? We can't do that today. Type of ideas keep popping in your head. And what if inside an electric field of a sufficient magnitude or different magnitude, in certain resonance situations, material have different properties? Just like as if you heated them up, they have different properties. If you have in a different electric field, which we do not measure,
exactly.
We don't do this very often.
Yes.
Well,
or
I'm just saying
vibration.
it's not important, but I'm just saying once you put it inside a different field, all the properties of that material could be different, at least, especially if it goes through a state.
Okay, so are you guys familiar with John Hutchinson?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so the guys on my team.
BC.
Okay, well, that's where he's from, but some of his experiments were run at George Hathaway's lab. Now, George is on my team, and he's a shareholder as well.
Oh. The Hutchison effect.
Hutchison effect. So I'm just letting us know some of the people that we're working with. George is, I'm a mechanical guy. George is a sparky, he's an electrical guy, and we get along really well. George's a pretty hardcore guy. I think my experimental methodology is better than his, okay? But that's just... But anyway, we were good compliments for each other. We're pretty skeptical about a lot of things, but we do, and he has, and recorded, and he's got a big piece of metal. It's just been completely disrupted and it's pulled right out apart. And
I've seen that on video, and it's incredibly impressive.
Right. So
I mean, I would imagine what you'd have to do it. You'd have to, like, what physical material, like, what would you have to do to fake that? I'm just saying.
It's not fake.
That's what I mean.
It's not fake. Like, it's sound. It's the power of sound.
No, I'm not. I'm not debating it's fake. I'm just saying it's very convincing, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Well, what we're seeing in both cases is what we would say is a non-thermal response of the material, and therefore, like in Safire, that's why we're saying that if we're getting this, it would be analogous to using a 9-volt battery to separate oxygen and hydrogen, compared to a thermal model, which requires 5,000 degrees to separate the two. So if you can get this right, we can harvest that binding energy and exothermically. And
not unlike the steam engine and state changes.
Well, I'm reminded of Peter Mungo Jupp and the Aborigines running on the stone that had been turned soft, but not hot.
There you go.
There you go.
One guy just posted down there in the chat here, these chondrules, like the big round spheres that were created, transmutation of electrical discharge similar to the small spheres. I would agree. He just showed a picture here. In my opinion, I would agree that this is probably maybe similar.
T. Clark is a she, by the way.
Is what?
She is a she.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. She was the Russian-sounding lady who was here earlier.
I heard some French in that accent.
I don't know what it was. European? I don't know.
No, I think it's Mexican.
Spanish.
Okay, see, Al, look at us. We're all probably wrong. So moving on.
No, she mentioned she spent her formative year. Well, she spent her formative years in Mexico. So.
Oh, okay. So softer.
She lives in Europe. She spent some time in the United States. Yeah.
So, any more questions, guys?
Are we done up here, or I mean, anyone else have a question?
I wanted to talk about the unexpected or switched kind of thing. Water has that property, so I would expect anything that has to do with water or the combination of that might flip the expectations.
Okay, so here it is here. So let me help you out with that one.
And then we'll go with Duff and the questions that
Okay, we didn't have oxygen in the chamber.
Okay.
You didn't have oxygen, yeah, but when you did the
let me finish here. We didn't have oxygen in the chamber. We did have hydrogen. Okay, so now you have the possibility of water, which we did see. But we didn't see the mass spectroscopy because we're doing real-time instrumentation measurements of the gas. So we do see an increase in the climb of water. We don't know where it's coming from. We purge the chamber completely, and some of these experiments we will see a molecular, I think it's 18s. We're seeing an atomic mass of 18 show up, and 28, which I think is and 2 maybe. But in any case, so we do see water increase. So we could be making water, but we don't know where the oxygen is coming from.
And I'm sure Ed would have a question or answer for you. Sorry.
Well, I'm saying the arcing itself, I would expect that would produce the oxygen, and then the combination, for whatever reason, for water is flipped, it freezes on the top, not the bottom up. So.
Okay.
Well, that's Gerald Pollack. Yeah. Anyway, Duff. Oh yeah. He's that's his theory there with the water freezing.
I'm here.
Anyway, go ahead with any questions. Then we'll let's see. We've been in here for quite a bit of time. Let me just take a look. It looks like 3 hours. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Let's just let's get let's one or two last questions if they're short, and we'll let poor Monty go.
He has a couple of things here. He says sunspots are the inward rush of electrons to a stronger, lower down positive, and balancing for the negative charges on opposite sides of the fusion zone positive.
Whoa. I was with you on the electron. Kind of makes sense, but I can't comment on that. I just wouldn't be in a position to do that. Don Scott might be a better position to give you some ideas on that.
His idea, Don's, was the collapse of the double layer, creating that field.
He also says controlled matter creation and manipulations are on 3 sides: electric, dielectric, and magnetic. It leads to infinity.
I think that's
he says,
Ken Wheeler
and
stuff,
he questions, are they afraid of this?
No, I just don't think it's science. Sorry, I shouldn't be mean to Ken Wheeler. I don't know him.
That's okay. It's all right. It's an honest answer. I appreciate it. William Edwards, photographic. Question for Monty. You see the results from Safire as being possibly so incredible that it will literally change the course of human history. This seems to me to be the paradigm shifter alone, and that kind of leads me to my question.
Okay, I'd like to. Try. That's the first question.
Yeah.
Okay, so where we are here is this, and this is where we can have a conversation over cold beer sometime.
Right.
Our team, we're here to serve. So, and I really mean that in the most orthodox sense of the word, serve. So we wouldn't be in a position to say that it'll change human history. That's really up to everyone else to make that determination. So what we do is this. We do the work that we're doing, and we submit it to you, and we submit it to the public domain as much as we can without giving away everything. And then we don't make judgments of our own work. And that's really for you to do and not for us to do. Our job is just to put our nose to the grindstone and do good work and let everyone else make their own judgments. Okay? So I'd like to get that out. That's really where we are. Okay?
Very important. Very important.
Yeah.
And that just kind of leads into my sort of real interest in. My interest is in sort of like your filmmaker. I'm interested in the interface of human beings to like new paradigms and how we cope with that, and how we use art and debate and all of our tools.
Okay,
yeah,
so
and screaming, joking and laughing, and all of that stuff. How do we apply those tools to help walk humanity through a paradigm shift? That's my question. That's my curiosity, very personally. And so, my question to you is very, very simply. You and was in reference to the gentleman that you said sort of had a meltdown. How do you not have a meltdown? I think, I think one of the things that we're seeing, everyone is listening to you talk, and I think we're all sort of like, our jaws are on the floor. All of our jaws are on the floor, literally, I can say that almost without doubt. So how do you cope with the enormity of what you're doing? How do you contextualize it? And how do you prioritize a way for you, obviously, to have, you talked about your family and your interests in life. How do you not have a meltdown?
Oh, I can answer that. Monty is open-minded. Go ahead, Monty.
Okay. What a wonderful question. That is a really, truly wonderful question. There's, again, we're getting into a very personal side of where I live personally. And how can I say this? Okay. There was a man in Canada, his name is Jordan Peterson, and he was challenged. He says, how can anyone like you say that you believe in God? And because you're a scientist or you're someone else. And I have come to the conclusion that there is a living God. I see the order in the universe as Newton did, and I see that it's been ordered. And you're going to find out that at the core of Safire, there's many of us who are, you might say, non-Orthodox Christians. And we're not using and must not use this work that we're doing as a platform to promote those things or tell people how they should live. So it really is about living in harmony and listening to what we believe. And I'm going to be straight up with you guys. We try to really listen to what the Holy Ghost is leading us into, and that's really where we live. Okay. Now you can believe those things or not believe those things and criticize us for that, and that's fine. But this is really me getting out that we would say that our Heavenly Father is really the true author of the work that we're doing. And so that's why I say if this does change for humanity, we're able to remediate nuclear waste and generate energy, then at the end of the day, we would say that's God's gift to humanity. And so we're his servant. And that's really where we live. So that's the balance. So I serve my wife in the sense that I'm learning every day how to love her because she's changing every day. Our kids, the people that we meet, but it's about humility, and it's not about promoting ourselves at all, ever. It's about doing good work and making sure ourselves are have things worked out in our lives personally first. And there's quite a discipline in that. So that's really where we are. And so but I don't go to church anymore because most of my Christian friends many of them are pretty tough to get along with because they're not really that open-minded, many of them. It doesn't mean that they're not believers, but they're not liberal enough to consider some of these things that we work through in that sense, if that makes any sense. I smoke cigars. I smoke cigars and I like to drink whiskey, and so that just wrote me off about 50% of all my friends. And I'm a sinner, and my view on this is this: if I was going to boil down the Christian walk and the message of Jesus Christ, is that I am personally less of an asshole today than I was yesterday, and that's really what I see it's about, and it's really that simple.
I am 100% with you, and let me just say that even and I'm not a believer in any way, but let me be very clear that the sense of wholesomeness in heart and stewardship for mankind and the planet that one would have does not necessarily require, don't get me wrong, I don't care how you get there. That's fine by me, okay? Because we're all in this together. This is this spaceship traveling through this rock or whatever. It's like, you know what I mean? So one must. I grew up with a Christian mother and family and an atheist father. One does not. Look how to tiptoe through that minefield, but they never fought. And if they can get along, it proved to me that this is ridiculous. I mean, we can get along easily on any of these things. We're most of us are all here because we want to see humanity get better.
It's like this: who am I to judge anyone when I know about myself? So I just thank God that I'm forgiven. and that's it. So I don't judge anyone for believing or not believing or any of those things, and we hold to those principles, those precepts. So that's what I've come to learn. So you were asking me a very personal question, and I'm a little reticent to talk about these things in the public domain because there's so much controversy over these things, and we want to present the science as good science, good work that we're doing, and not as a means to use it as a platform to promote our particular things. But that last question, you see, demands that I be honest with you.
See,
Well,
I hope most
No, the goodness in you demands.
Listen,
that you
here's
be
the deal.
honest with
Bottom
us.
line, I'm sorry. Here's the deal. I gotta say, absolutely, man. I have nothing but respect for you, and I'm a firm atheist today. And I tell you what, there was a time for 7 years of my life where I was a devout Christian, and the precepts and the concepts and the ideas and the ethics and the morals and the values that Christ taught me have not left me.
Yeah,
and I know I
100%
no longer
behind that.
believe. I no longer believe in the real in. I don't believe Jesus ever existed.
Doesn't
But
matter though his values.
Then that's my point. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Literally does not matter, because what you're communicating are values and ideals and ethics that are and should be universal, and that's what I hear you saying. That you
I
found that
always
in
say
your
that-
relationship with Christ is absolutely 100% something that, as an atheist, I can and should respect. So that's my honesty. You're honest with me, and so that's me being honest with you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that purpose. I think people first of all need vision for themselves. Without vision, I think they perish. And I think that once a person has a vision, then that brings purpose into life and a goal. And a vision is always goes beyond our current abilities. Otherwise, it'd just be boring.
That's how science starts anyway. We start with a guess.
Yeah.
So then once
one of my sayings is, you must take the good out of the Bible and leave the rest in the garbage can.
Well, let's not even dwell on that. Go on, Monty.
So in that, I think that once a person has vision, if they don't have vision, I think they're not in a very good place themselves, which people can get squashed in this world, and they do. And then they don't have purpose, and then it just deteriorates for them personally. But I think vision and purpose, once a person has purpose, happiness comes out of that. And it's not the pursuit of happiness for myself personally, it's a pursuit to make sure that we maintain a vision and purpose in my life. So my purpose, I want to be the best husband I can be. Been married for 42 years. I can solve some of the mysteries of the universe here, okay? But my wife, she is a mystery. I do not know. She's always changing. And so that's about purpose. So I have different things in my life. One here is to do good work. And the other on my personal side is to be, well, the best husband, the best boss, okay, which whatever that means, because it changes day to day, best grandpa. And that's kind of what it's about for me personally. And that's where I find balance. And there's times when I get, like, there's a lot of work associated with this project, and I can find that there's a little bit of unbalance happening, and I've got to just take a step back, just breathe. I've got a lot of work ahead of us. I've got to pull a team together. I've got to get the corporate side wrapped up. We've got the science we've got to do, a prospectus we've got to do, and I just, the work is pretty high. But then just sit with my sweetheart, have a sip of whiskey, and be in love is really what I see. I think love is the key. And if I find myself getting outside of that, that's not a good place for me to be. So I've got to get back into that place. So I trust that covers that. But you'll never see me in a podium, like if I'm presenting the work that we're doing, talk about those things, because it's just not, it wouldn't be right, you see. So we just had our sip of whiskey around the campfire, okay?
No, don't feel bad at all. Your words are 100% with us on many levels, and I don't think that
awesome.
anyone would feel wrong in saying that they would like to be motivated by those. I mean, you feel bad when I actually feel bad. I do anyway. If I said you, but I feel bad when I see that someone is like clearly doing something for, like, come on, just let it go, let the ego go. Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. 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 It's okay.
Yeah.
The
It
world
is.
is not the same as you thought it was.
No.
Cope.
What does Dave?
Moving on.
What does Dave say at the beginning of all of his shows? Dave always says, there is nothing to fear. Everything is okay. You're safe. It's just that your entire universe is going to explode here in about 30 seconds. So sit down, relax.
Actually,
and change your entire paradigm.
Let me change. Well, actually, the whole universe can explode, or the whole place could explode instantly. We never know. But I mean, it's unlikely. Seems pretty stable. But
yeah, it seems pretty stable.
If Monty changes a knob, we're gonna go. It.
Well, we really no. God help us, that ever happens. So if it does,
keep us posted on your work with CERN, though. That's fascinating.
I'll be one of the first to go because I'm closest to it.
Well, I'd like to pick that conversation up with them. It was just an initial invitation. They're interested to see if they could do a Safire over there, and that's just an initial connection. It would be great. I think we could work something out. But it just means that the people over there are far more open than what I think a lot of people thought they were. And that's a good thing, I think.
That is incredibly encouraging.
That is, yes.
Well, they're driven by proof, and if you can give them proof, they're going to change their paradigm.
I think so. That's my read on them. What I've met a few people. I met another guy who was presenting on behalf of one of the directors, and he gave his presentation at the University of Bath. And another guy was quite open. So I'm thinking, wow, like you hear all these stories of these particle physicists, they're locked in, and some of them aren't actually, and they still have the job, which is pretty amazing, considering.
If you're at that level, you want to be questioning things still, even if you're not publicly questioning things.
Well, this guy he just put a video up.
If you have any credibility.
Yeah, I think they qualify them. They think that these questions need to be on the table, that need to be answered, and they're mysteries, and they shouldn't be dismissed as outliers or some weird thing or whatever. And just
thank God.
So that's what I got very loud and clear, which I think is pretty cool. That just means that there's some hope in a sense.
Can I say woohoo?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it? And maybe because the work that we're doing will help open those things up so they can ask better questions.
This conversation
already
made me start questioning archaeology in the past. Like I said, just that one statement I made before, but I'm beginning to realize, holy crap, the implications are huge. And because what you're doing, and I'm not actually, I'll save that for another time. This has been wonderful. I think that, guys, this has been great. Thank the audience. You guys have also been amazing. These questions have been great. And I hate to use the word great because it's been done because of, who, but.
Well, the Bostonians use freaking wicked awesome.
It's freaking wicked awesome, dude.
That's actually good. Let's do that. Freaking wicked
awesome.
Well, we're privileged. Honestly, I can speak for the whole team. We're privileged that you invited us, and we're honored that you invited us. And the questions have been really excellent and extremely engaging, which is great. And
well, we'll meet up on EU 2020 in Portland there. So,
isn't Michael from Boston?
Michael
Claridge, isn't he from Boston?
He's from Canada.
Oh, I thought you said I'm Michael Claridge. I thought, Michael, you're online.
No, you're Monty Childs. I know this.
Yeah, I know. Well, you have that kind of Boston accent or something. It's like, wow, you just sounded like him for a second. So, Michael, what are you doing on this line? So, yeah, Michael's from Boston.
Well, freaking wicked awesome applies.
Yes. Yeah, I can hear him saying that. Yes.
That's great.
So we are really, truly honored and privileged to be able to share these things with you guys and gals. And, really is. So it's cool. It's cool. We're cool. So there you are.
Thank you so much.
Well, God bless everyone. Thank you for showing up, everybody.
Yes.
Okay. So now what do we do, Neil? Is this when we all sign off? And